Chapter 1. The Eve of the War. In the first book, I moved away from my own story many times. I told you about my brother and what he lived through. Because of that, for the last 2 chapters, I and the curate stayed hidden. We were hiding in an empty house at Halliford. We ran there to escape the black smoke. Now I will go on from that place. We stayed in that house all Sunday night. We also stayed all the next day. That next day was the day of the panic. Inside the house there was a little island of daylight. Outside, the black smoke cut us off from the rest of the world. We could do nothing. We could only wait. We waited with pain in our bodies and fear in our minds. Those 2 days felt very long. My mind was full of worry about my wife. I thought of her at Leatherhead. I pictured her there, very scared. I thought she might be in danger. I thought she might already be crying for me, as if I was dead. I walked up and down in the rooms. I cried out loud when I thought about her. I felt cut off from her. I felt far away, with no way to reach her. I thought of all the bad things that could happen to her while I was not there. My cousin was with her, and I knew he was brave. He was brave enough for any hard moment, but he was not quick to see danger. He was not quick to act fast. Now we did not need only bravery. We needed care and wise fear. We needed to notice danger early and move at once. My only comfort was one small thought. I told myself the Martians were moving toward London. I told myself they were moving away from Leatherhead. That hope was not strong, but it was something. These weak fears made my mind sharp and painful. I became very tired. I became angry easily. The curate kept making small cries and short prayers. He spoke again and again. His words made me feel worse. I got tired of seeing his fear. I got tired of his selfish despair. I tried to speak to him and calm him. I told him more than once to stop, but it did not help, so I stayed away from him. I stayed in a room that was clearly for children. It looked like a schoolroom. It had globes, simple seats, and copybooks. I went there to be alone, but the curate followed me there, so I went up again, to a small box room at the top of the house. I locked myself in. I wanted to be alone with my pain. I wanted quiet. I wanted to think of my wife without his voice in my ears. All that day and the next morning too, the black smoke trapped us. It held us in. We were hemmed in. On Sunday evening, we saw signs of people in the house next door. We saw a face at a window. We saw lights moving inside. Later, we heard a door slam. But I do not know who these people were. I do not know what happened to them. The next day, we did not see them again. There was no sound from them. There was nothing. On Monday morning, the black smoke moved slowly toward the river. It drifted riverward. It crept closer and closer to us. At last it moved along the road outside our house. That road was the road that hit us. The smoke was so near that it felt like a wall around us. About midday, a Martian came across the fields. It was not far. It sent out the black stuff with a jet of very hot steam. The steam hissed loud against the walls. It smashed the windows it touched. It broke glass with sharp sounds. The curate ran from the front room. As he ran, the steam burned his hand. He cried out and fled. After that, we waited. Then, when we could, we crawled across the wet rooms. The rooms were sodden. We looked out again. The land to the north looked like a black snowstorm had fallen. Everything was dark and covered. The grass in the fields looked burned and spoiled. We looked toward the river. We saw something strange. We saw red color mixing with the black of the burned ground. The meadows were scorched, but now there was also a redness. It was hard to understand. It looked unaccountable. It looked like the earth itself had turned red in places. At first, we did not see how this change mattered to us. We only felt one thing. We were glad. We were glad because we were less afraid of the black smoke. We thought the smoke was moving away. Later, I understood more. I saw that we were no longer trapped. We were no longer hemmed in. Now we might escape. We might get away from the house. As soon as I saw that the way was open, my wish to act came back. I wanted to move. I wanted to go. But the curate did not want to go. He was slow. He was dull and unreasonable. He kept saying the same words. "We are safe here," he said again and again. Safe here. I decided to leave him. I wish I had done it then. I was wiser now because of what the artilleryman had taught me. I did not waste time in talk. I looked for food and drink. I looked for anything that could help me live. I found oil and rags for my burns. I put them on my hurt skin. I also took a hat. I took a flannel shirt from one of the bedrooms. I needed better clothes. When the curate saw that I truly meant to go alone, something changed. He saw I had accepted going alone. Then he suddenly woke up inside. He roused himself. He said he would come with me. The afternoon stayed quiet. We heard no new danger, so we started. I think it was about 5 o'clock. We walked along the road toward Sunbury. The road was blackened. It looked burned and dirty. In Sunbury and in places along the road, we saw dead bodies. We saw bodies of men. We saw bodies of horses, too. They lay in strange, twisted shapes. There were carts turned over. There was luggage scattered in the road. Everything was covered with thick black dust. The dust was like cinders. It made me think of Pompeii, the city I had read about, where people died under ash and dust. Still, we reached Hampton Court without trouble. We had no fight. We met no Martian there. Our minds were full of strange sights. Everything looked new and terrible. At Hampton Court, our eyes felt some relief. We saw a patch of green. It was a small place that the drift had not covered. It looked fresh and alive. We went through Bushy Park. Deer moved there. They went to and fro under the chestnut trees. We also saw some men and women far away. They were hurrying toward Hampton. These were the first people we had seen in a long time. Then we came on to Twickenham. Across the road, the woods beyond Ham and Petersham were still on fire. The flames were still burning. Twickenham itself was not hurt by the heat ray. It was also not hurt by the black smoke. There were more people here, but no one could tell us any news. Most people were like us. They were taking a chance during a quiet time to move to a new place. I felt that many houses were still full. Many scared people stayed inside, too frightened to run, too frightened even to move. Here, the signs of a quick flight were everywhere. The road showed it clearly. I remember one thing very well. I saw 3 bicycles smashed together in a heap. They were pounded into the road by the wheels of carts that came after. The metal was bent. The frames were broken. We crossed Richmond Bridge at about 8:30. We hurried across because the bridge was open and dangerous. On a bridge you can be seen. Still, I noticed something in the river. I saw red masses floating down the stream. There were many. Some were many feet across. I did not know what they were. There was no time to stop and look. I made a worse meaning in my mind than was true. I thought of horrible things. On the Surrey side, there was again black dust. It was dust that had once been smoke. There were dead bodies too. There was a heap of bodies near the station approach, but we did not see the Martians then. Not yet. We walked on until we were some way toward Barnes. In the distance, we saw 3 people running. They ran down a side street toward the river. Other than that, the place seemed empty. Richmond town, up the hill, was burning bright. Outside Richmond, there was no black smoke. The air looked clearer there. Then, as we came close to Kew, something happened fast. A number of people ran toward us. At the same time, we saw the upper part of a Martian fighting machine. It rose over the housetops. It was not far. It was not even 100 yards away. We stopped like statues. We were shocked. We were full of fear. If the Martian had looked down at us, we would have died at once. We were so terrified we could not go on. We turned aside and hid in a shed in a garden. In that shed, the curate crouched down. He wept in silence. He would not move again. He refused to go on. He was like a broken man. But I had one fixed idea. I had to reach Leatherhead. That thought would not let me rest. When twilight came, I went out again. I moved through a shrubbery. I went along a passage beside a big house in its own grounds. In this way, I came out on the road toward Kew. I left the curate in the shed, but he did not stay. He came after me, hurrying. That second start was the most foolish thing I ever did. It was clear the Martians were around us. As soon as the curate reached me, we saw a fighting machine again. It might have been the same one or another one. It was far away, across the meadows, toward Kew Lodge. Before it, we saw 4 or 5 small black figures. They were running. They hurried across the green-gray field. At once, we saw the truth. The Martian was chasing them. In only 3 long strides, it was among them. The people ran away from its feet in all directions. They spread out like points of a star. The Martian did not use the heat ray. It did not burn them. Instead, it picked them up one by one. It lifted them as if they were dolls. Behind the Martian, there was a great metallic carrier. It stuck out behind it. It looked like a big basket. The Martian threw the people into that carrier. It was like a workman who carries a basket over his shoulder. This sight froze my blood. This was the first time I understood something new. The Martians might have another purpose. Maybe they did not only want to kill and burn. Maybe they wanted to take people. Maybe they wanted defeated humans for something else. We stood still for a moment. We could not move. Then we turned and ran. We went through a gate behind us into a walled garden. We fell into a ditch. It was not a smart plan. It was more like we stumbled into a lucky place. We lay there in the ditch. We did not dare to whisper. We stayed there until the stars came out. I think it was nearly 11 o'clock before we dared to move again. Now we did not go back into the road. We were too afraid. We moved like thieves. We sneaked along hedges. We went through small plantations of trees. We watched hard through the dark. The curate walked on my right side. I walked on his left side. We kept looking for Martians. They seemed to be everywhere. In one place, we made a mistake and walked into a burned area. The ground was scorched and black. It was cooling now. It looked ashen. There were dead bodies scattered there. Men lay on the ground. Their heads and bodies were burned in a terrible way, but their legs and boots were mostly whole. There were dead horses too. A little behind them, maybe 50 feet, there was a line of 4 guns. They were ripped and broken. Gun carriages were smashed. Sheen, it seemed, had not been destroyed, but it was silent. It was empty. There, we did not happen to see dead bodies, but the night was very dark. We could not see into the side roads well. In Sheen, the curate suddenly said he felt weak. He said he was faint. He said he was thirsty. So we decided to try a house. The first house we entered was a small, semi-detached villa. We had some trouble with the window, but we got in. Inside, I found almost nothing to eat. Only some cheese was there, and it was moldy. Still, there was water. We drank water. I also took a hatchet. A hatchet can break doors and help in the next house. I thought it might save our lives. Then we crossed to a place where the road turns toward Mortlake. There was a white house inside a walled garden. We got into it. In the pantry, we found food. We found 2 loaves of bread in a pan. We found an uncooked steak. We found half of a ham. I list these things so exactly because this food became very important. By fate, we would live on this store for the next 2 weeks. Under a shelf, there were bottles of beer. There were also 2 bags of haricot beans. There were some lettuces too, but they were limp. The pantry opened into a kind of wash-up kitchen. In that wash-up kitchen, there was firewood. There was also a cupboard. In the cupboard, we found nearly a dozen bottles of Burgundy. We also found tinned soups and salmon. We found 2 tins of biscuits. We sat in the next kitchen, in the dark. We did not dare to make a light. We ate bread and ham. We drank beer from the same bottle. The curate was still afraid and restless. But now, in a strange way, he wanted to go on again. He wanted to push forward at once. I told him to eat. I told him he must keep his strength. I was urging him to eat more when the thing happened, the thing that trapped us. "It can't be midnight yet," I said softly. At that moment, there was a blinding flash. It was a vivid green light. For one instant, everything in the kitchen jumped into clear sight, in green and black. Then it vanished again. Right after that came a crash of sound like nothing I had ever heard before or since. It was a concussion that hit the air and the bones in my body. Almost at once behind me, something struck. There was a thud. There was glass breaking. There was a crash and a rattle of falling stone all around us. Plaster fell from the ceiling. It broke into many pieces on our heads. I was thrown across the floor. I hit the oven handle. I was stunned. I lost sense and knew nothing for a long time. The curate told me later that I was insensible for a long time. When I woke, we were in darkness again. The curate's face was wet. Later, I learned it was blood. He had a cut on his forehead. He was using water. He was dabbing water over me, trying to help me. For a while, I could not remember anything. My mind was empty. Then slowly, the truth came back. I felt a bruise on my temple. Pain made the memory return. "Are you better?" the curate asked in a whisper. After some time, I answered. I sat up. "Don't move," he whispered. "The floor is full of smashed plates and cups from the dresser. You cannot move without noise, and I think they are outside." We both sat still. We tried not to breathe loud. It was so quiet that we could almost hear our own hearts. Everything felt dead and still. Once, close to us, some broken brick or plaster slid down with a low rumble. Outside, very near, we heard a sound again and again. It was a metallic rattle, like metal moving. "That!" the curate said when the sound came again. "Yes," I whispered. "But what is it?" "A Martian," he whispered. I listened hard. The sound was not like the heat ray. For some time I thought a great fighting machine had hit the house by accident. I had seen one stumble once against the tower of Shepperton Church. I thought maybe it had stumbled here too. Our situation was so strange that we could not understand it. For 3 or 4 hours, until dawn, we hardly moved. Then light began to come in. It did not come through the window. The window stayed black. The light came through a small triangle gap. The gap was between a beam and a heap of broken bricks behind us. For the first time, we saw the kitchen in weak gray light. The window had been broken by a mass of garden soil. The soil had poured into the kitchen. It flowed over the table where we had sat. It lay around our feet. Outside, the earth was banked high against the house. At the top of the window frame, we could see a drain pipe torn out of the ground. The floor was covered with broken things. The end of the kitchen toward the main house was smashed open. Since daylight came from that direction too, it was clear that much of the house had fallen down. In a strange contrast, some things inside still looked neat. The dresser was there. It was pale green. Under it were copper and tin vessels. The wallpaper looked like blue and white tiles. On the wall above the kitchen range, there were a couple of colored paper pages fluttering a little. As the dawn became brighter, we looked through the gap in the wall. We saw a Martian body there. It stood like a guard. It seemed to be watching the cylinder, which was still glowing. When we saw that, we moved as carefully as we could. We crawled out of the weak light of the kitchen. We went into the darker scullery. Then the meaning hit me. I understood. "The 5th cylinder," I whispered. "The 5th shot from Mars hit this house. It buried us under the ruins." For a moment the curate said nothing. Then he whispered, "God have mercy upon us." After that I heard him making small crying sounds to himself. We stayed in the scullery. We hardly moved. I did not dare to breathe deep. My eyes stayed fixed on the faint light at the kitchen doorway. I could just see the curate's face, only a dim oval in the dark. I could see his collar and his cuffs as pale shapes. Outside, new sounds began. First, there was a metallic hammering. Then there was a loud hooting. Then, after quiet, there was a hissing sound, like the hissing of an engine. Most of these noises were hard to understand. They came and went. Over time, it felt like there were more of them. Later, we heard a steady thudding. We felt a vibration. It made everything around us shake. Vessels in the pantry rang and shifted. Once, the light at the kitchen doorway was blocked. The doorway became completely dark for a while. Many hours passed like this. We crouched there, silent and shaking with cold and fear. Our tired minds could not stay sharp forever. At last, our attention broke. We drifted into sleep and half-sleep in the dark. In the end, I woke up. I was very hungry. I think we must have spent most of a day like that before I woke. My hunger was strong. It pushed me to move. I told the curate I would look for food. I felt my way toward the pantry. He did not answer me at first. He stayed quiet. But as soon as I began to eat, the small sounds I made woke him. I heard him move. I heard him crawl after me in the dark. Chapter 2. The Falling Star. After we ate, we crept back to the scullery. I must have slept again. When I looked around later, I was alone. The hard, dull thudding did not stop. It kept beating again and again, and it made me feel tired. I whispered for the curate many times. At last, I felt my way to the kitchen door. It was still day. I saw him across the room. He lay close to the small triangular hole in the wall. That hole looked out toward the Martians. His shoulders were high and hunched up, and I could not see his head. I could hear many sounds, almost like the sounds in a place where engines work. The whole house shook with the steady thud. Through the small opening, I could see the top of a tree. The light made the tree look golden. I could also see a calm evening sky, warm and blue. For a short time, I only watched the curate. Then I moved forward. I stayed low. I walked very slowly and very carefully. The floor was full of broken plates and cups. I tried not to touch them. I touched the curate's leg. He jumped so hard that some plaster outside slid down. It fell with a loud bang. I grabbed his arm at once because I feared he would cry out. For a long time we stayed still. We crouched and did not move. Then I turned to look at our wall of rubble and earth. The plaster that fell had left a long, thin slit in the debris. I raised myself a little. I did it very carefully, and I used a beam to steady myself. Through the slit, I could see outside. It had been a quiet street last night with houses in a calm suburb. Now it looked completely different. The fifth cylinder must have fallen into the house we visited first. That house was gone. It was smashed into dust. It was broken and spread everywhere. The cylinder now lay far below the old ground level. It was deep in a hole. This hole was already much bigger than the pit I had looked into at Woking. The earth around the cylinder had splashed out from the ooter. Splashed is the only word I can use. It was like wet mud when you hit it with a hammer. The soil flew out and landed in high piles. These piles hid parts of the nearby houses. Our own house had fallen backward. The front part was destroyed. Even the front of the ground floor was gone. By luck, the kitchen and scullery were not fully broken. They were now buried under soil and ruins. Tons of earth pressed in on every side, except on the side that faced the cylinder. Now we were on the very edge of the great round pit. The Martians were working there. The heavy beating sound was clearly close, just behind us. Again and again, a bright green vapor rose up and moved like a curtain across our small view. The cylinder was already open. It was open in the middle of the pit. On the far side of the pit, among broken bushes and heaps of gravel, one of the great fighting machines stood there. It was tall and stiff against the evening sky. No Martian was inside it at that moment. At first, I did not look much at the pit or even at the cylinder. I looked first at something else. I saw a strange, shining thing working in the pit. I also saw strange bodies moving slowly on the piles of earth near it. The shining thing held my eyes first. It was a kind of machine. Later, people called it a handling machine. People studied it after the war, and that study helped many inventions on Earth. When I first saw it, it looked like a metal spider. It had 5 jointed legs. The legs looked quick and strong. Around its body, it had many jointed arms, bars, and long-reaching parts like thin tentacles. Many of its arms were pulled in close to its body, but 3 long tentacles were stretched out. With these, it was pulling things out of the cylinder. It pulled out rods, plates, and bars. These pieces lined the cover of the cylinder. They seemed to make the cylinder strong. As the handling machine pulled them out, it lifted them up. Then it placed them on flat ground behind it in an orderly way. The movements were so fast, so complex, and so exact that at first I did not think of it as a machine. It shone like metal, but it moved like a living thing. The fighting machines were also very well made and very smooth in movement, but this was even more so. This one was beyond them in quick skill. People who have never seen these things do not really understand how alive they looked. Some people only saw drawings by artists, or they read weak reports by people who did not see clearly. Those people often imagine something stiff and simple. That is wrong. I remember a picture in one early pamphlet that told the story of the war. The artist had looked quickly at one fighting machine, that was all. He drew them as stiff tripods. He did not show their flexible movement. He drew them all looking the same. The pamphlet became popular and many people read it. I mention it only to warn you. Those drawings were not like the real Martians in action. A stiff doll is not like a real person. In my view, the pamphlet would have been better without those pictures. At first, I did not feel that the handling machine was a machine at all. I thought it looked like a crab, with a hard shining skin. I thought the Martian inside it, with its delicate tentacles, was like the brain part of the crab. In that moment, it felt as if the Martian and the machine were one creature. But then I noticed something. I saw that the gray-brown, shiny, leather-like skin on the machine was like the skin of the bodies lying beyond it. Then I understood the truth. This quick worker was not a creature of its own. It was a tool used by the Martians. When I understood this, my interest moved to the other bodies. These were the real Martians. I had already seen them a little before, but only in a quick glance. The first sickness in my stomach was less strong now. I could look more carefully. Also, I was hidden and still. I did not need to move. I did not need to act right then. Now I saw the Martians clearly. They were the strangest beings I could imagine. They were like huge round bodies, almost like only heads. Each was about 4 feet across. On the front of each body was a face. The face had no nose holes. It seems the Martians had no sense of smell, but they had 2 very large dark eyes. Under the eyes was something like a soft beak of flesh. On the back of the head body was one tight round part like a drum. Later we learned it was an ear, but in our thick air it must have been almost useless. Around the mouth were 16 thin tentacles. They were almost like whips. They were in 2 groups, 8 on each side. Later, Professor Howes called these groups hands, and that name fits well. When I first saw them, the Martians seemed to be trying to push themselves up with these hands, but on Earth they were too heavy. They could not lift themselves well. There is reason to think that on Mars they could move with more ease, using these tentacles to go forward. Their inside parts were also very simple. Later, people cut them open and studied them. Most of the body was brain. Big nerves went from the brain to the eyes to the ear and to the feeling tentacles. They also had big lungs. The mouth opened into the lungs. They had a heart and blood tubes. They had trouble breathing in our thicker air. They were also heavier under our stronger gravity. I could see their trouble in the shaking movements of their outer skin. Their skin moved in a jerking way, like a body struggling to breathe. And that was almost all. They had no stomach and no long inside tubes like ours. They were heads, almost only heads. They had no entrails. They did not eat food like we do. They did not digest food. Instead, they took fresh living blood from other creatures. Then they put that blood into their own veins. I have seen this being done. I will mention it later in its proper place. But even now, I do not want to describe it fully. I could not endure watching it for long. I will only say this. Blood from a living animal, very often from a human being, was put into them by a small tube, like a pipette. It went straight into a receiving canal. This idea is horrible to us, but we should remember something. Our way of eating meat might seem horrible to an intelligent rabbit, so we should try to look at it with some calm thought, even if we feel sick. There are clear body advantages in injection, if you think about it. Humans spend huge time and energy on eating and digesting. Our bodies have many glands and tubes and organs. These turn mixed food into blood. Digestion also affects the nerves. It can take our strength. It can also change our minds and feelings. People can be happy or sad because of their liver or because of their stomach glands. But the Martians were above these changes. They did not have these body swings of mood and emotion. They also seemed to prefer humans as their blood source. Part of the reason may be seen in the dead bodies they brought from Mars as food for the journey. Some dried remains of these victims later fell into human hands. From these remains, people judged what those Mars creatures were like. They were two-legged, they had weak muscles, they had light, brittle skeletons, almost like the skeletons of some sponges. They stood about 6 feet high. They had round, upright heads and big eyes set in hard sockets. 2 or 3 of these were brought in each cylinder. All were killed before they reached Earth. That was lucky for them. If they had tried to stand upright here, our gravity would have broken every bone in their bodies. While I am describing them, I will add more details. Not all of these were clear to us at the time, but they help you form a clearer picture of these offensive beings. In 3 other points, their bodies were very different from ours. First, they did not sleep. The heart of a man never sleeps, and the Martians were like that too. Because they had no large system of muscles to rest and rebuild, they did not have that daily time of shutdown. They also seemed to feel little or no tiredness. On Earth, they could not move without effort, yet they kept working. In 24 hours, they did 24 hours of work. On Earth, ants may be like that. Second, and very strange for a world with sexes, the Martians had no sex at all, so they did not have the strong emotions that come from male and female difference in humans. There is now no doubt that a young Martian was born on Earth during the war. It was found attached to its parent. It was partly budded off, like a young bulb growing from a lily bulb, or like a young water polyp growing from a parent. In humans, and in higher animals, this way of making young has disappeared, but on Earth it was once the early way. In lower animals, and even up to some early relatives of backboned animals, both ways can exist side by side. Later, the sex way took over almost completely. On Mars, it seems the opposite happened. The budding way stayed. It is worth noting that one writer, long before the invasion, guessed a future human shape not unlike the Martian shape. His idea appeared in November or December of 1893 in a publication called the Pall Mall Budget, which later died. I also remember a joke drawing of it in a magazine called Punch. That writer said, in a joking tone, that better machines would make limbs less needed, better chemicals would make digestion less needed. He said hair, an outer nose, teeth, ears, and a chin were no longer necessary. He said natural selection might make these parts get smaller over ages. He said the brain would stay the main need. He said one other part might stay strong too, and that was the hand, the teacher and agent of the brain. While the rest of the body grew smaller, the hands would grow bigger. Many true things are written as jokes. With the Martians we see, beyond doubt, such a result. Intelligence has pushed down the animal side. I can believe that the Martians may have come from beings not unlike us, by slow growth of brain and hands. The hands in the end became 2 bunches of delicate tentacles. The rest of the body became less and less. Without the body, the brain would become selfish intelligence, with little of the deep emotional base that humans have. The last main point in which they were different from us seems small at first, but it matters. Microorganisms that cause disease on Earth seem not to exist on Mars, or if they did once exist, Martian cleanliness science removed them long ago. Many human diseases, fevers, and infections never touch Martian life. Things like consumption, cancers, tumors, and other bad growths do not enter their world. While I speak of life on Mars, I will also mention the strange red weed. It gave a curious hint. It seems plant life on Mars may be mainly red, not green. At least, the seeds the Martians brought to Earth always made red plants grow. Only one of these plants truly spread against Earth plants. People called it the red weed. Another red creeper grew for a short time, and few people saw it alive. But the red weed grew very fast and strong. By the 3rd or 4th day of our imprisonment, it was already growing up the sides of the pit. Its branches were like cactus branches. They made a red fringe at the edge of our triangular window. Later, I found it spread widely in the country, especially near streams and water. The Martians had what seems to be an ear, the single round drum at the back of the head body. Their eyes had a range like ours, but Philip said blue and violet looked black to them. Many people think Martians talked by sound and by moving their tentacles. Some books say this, including the same pamphlet I mentioned before. That pamphlet was written by someone who was not an eyewitness, though it was clever and quickly made. Now I saw more of the Martians in action than any other living human. I do not claim credit for this. It was only an accident. But it is true. I watched them closely many times. I saw 4, 5, and once 6 of them doing very complex work together. They did it without sound and without gestures. Their strange hooting sound always came before feeding. It did not change in tone. I believe it was not a signal. I think it was only the breathing out of air before the sucking action. I know some basic psychology. In this matter, I am sure as I am about anything, that the Martians shared thoughts without any physical sign. They did not need sound or gesture. I believe this even though I had strong doubts before. In fact, before the invasion, I had written against telepathy with some force. But what I saw changed my mind. The Martians wore no clothes. Their ideas of decoration and shame must have been different from ours. They also seemed less sensitive to changes of temperature than humans are. Changes of air pressure also did not seem to harm them much. Even though they wore no clothes, their real power over humans was not in that. Their power was in the tools they added to their bodies. We humans with bicycles, skates, flying machines, guns, sticks, and other tools are only at the start of a path the Martians have already finished. They were almost only brains. They wore different bodies when they needed them, like humans wear clothes, or like a human takes a bicycle in a hurry, or carries an umbrella in rain. Of all their tools, one fact amazed me. A thing that is common in human machines was missing. The wheel was missing. Among all the things they brought to Earth, there was no sign of wheels at all. You would at least expect wheels for moving, yet there were none. And it is curious that even in nature on Earth, life did not make the wheel, or it chose other ways instead. Not only did the Martians not use the wheel, they also used very little of the fixed pivot, the simple turning point that makes a circle in one flat plane. Almost all their joints were made with sliding parts. These parts moved over small, beautifully curved bearings. Also, the long lever arms of their machines were often moved by a kind of false muscle. It looked like discs inside an elastic skin. When electricity ran through them, the discs pulled together, strongly and tightly. In this way, the machine moved like an animal. This animal-like movement was very disturbing to a human watcher. The crab-like handling machine, which I first watched, had many of these false muscles. It looked more alive than the real Martians lying beyond it in the sunset. Those Martians were panting. Their tentacles moved weakly. They were still tired and hurt after their huge journey through space. While I watched them in the sunlight and looked at every strange detail of their form, the curate pulled hard at my arm. He reminded me he was there. I turned and saw his face. It was dark and angry. He did not speak, but his lips showed what he wanted. He wanted to look through the slit himself. The slit was so small that only one person could use it, so I had to stop watching for a time. I gave him the place, and he looked. When I looked again later, the handling machine had already put together several pieces it took from the cylinder. It made a shape that looked like its own shape. Down on the left side, I saw another small digging machine. It was working hard. It sent out jets of green vapor. It moved around the pit. It dug and built banks in a careful, planned way. This was the thing that made the steady beating sound. This was the thing that made the rhythmic shocks that kept our broken refuge shaking. As it worked, it also made piping and whistling sounds. As far as I could see, this digging thing had no Martian directing it at all. It worked on its own, like a tool that needed no driver. Chapter 3. On Horsell Common. When a second fighting machine came, we left the small hole at once and went back into the scullery. We were afraid. The Martian was high up. We thought he might look down and see us behind our wall of earth and broken house. Later, after some time, we felt a little safer. We learned something. In the bright sunlight outside, our dark hiding place would look like a black hole. To the Martian's eyes, it might look like nothing at all. But at first, even a small sign that a Martian was coming made us run back. My heart beat hard each time. I felt fear in my chest and I pulled back as fast as I could. Still, even with this danger, we could not stop looking. The wish to peep outside was too strong for both of us. It is strange to me now. We were in great danger. We were between hunger and a death that was worse, but we still fought for the terrible right to look. We would run across the kitchen in a silly, ugly way. We were eager to see, but we were also afraid to make a sound. We moved fast and slow at the same time. We bumped each other. We hit each other. We pushed and kicked. We did this very close to the opening, very close to danger. The truth is this: the curate and I were not alike at all. Our ways of thinking were not the same. Our habits were not the same. And being alone and trapped made this worse. Even before this, at Halliford, I had begun to hate his way of acting. He would cry out in a helpless way. He would make weak sounds. His mind was stiff. He could not think in a clear way. He kept talking to himself all the time in a low voice. His long muttering made it hard for me to plan. It broke every effort I made to think of what to do. When I was trapped with him, it drove me close to madness. He had no self-control. He was like a foolish woman in this way. He would cry for hours. He would weep and weep. I truly believe that, to the end, he thought his weak tears would help us. He thought they could change something, but they did not help. They only made me suffer more. I had to sit in darkness and listen to him. I could not forget he was there, because he kept pulling at me with his needs and his words. He also ate more than I did. I told him our only real chance was to stay in the house. We had to wait until the Martians finished their work in the pit. We had to be patient for a long time. Then, later, we might need food very much. But he did not listen. He ate and drank in a wild way. He did it in big meals, but not often. He would eat a lot at one time, then wait a long time, then eat a lot again. He slept very little. As the days passed, his careless way became worse. It made our danger greater. It made our fear greater. It made our pain sharper. I hated doing it, but I had to use threats. At last, I even hit him. After that, he listened for a short time, but he was a weak kind of man. He had no pride. He was full of fear. He was pale and sick in spirit. He was hateful to me. He also had a sly kind of cunning. He did not face God. He did not face other people. He did not even face himself. I do not like to remember these things. I do not like to write them. But I write them so my story will not miss anything. People who never saw the dark side of life will blame me. They will blame my roughness. They will blame my sudden rage at the end. They know what is wrong, like anyone can know, but they do not know what a tortured man can do. People who have been under the shadow, people who have been pushed down to the lowest, simplest parts of life, may judge with more kindness. Inside the house, we fought our quiet fight. We whispered. We grabbed food and drink. We held each other's hands in anger. We hit each other. But outside, in the hard sunlight of that terrible June, the Martians kept working in the pit. Their work went on in a strange and steady way. It was like a routine to them. Now I will go back to what I saw at first. After a long time, I dared to go back to the small hole. I looked out again. I saw that there were more Martians now. There were Martians inside not just one machine, but inside 3 fighting machines. These new ones had brought new tools with them. The tools were set in neat places around the cylinder, like they had a plan. The second handling machine was now finished. It was working. It was helping one of the new tools that the big machine had brought. This new tool looked a bit like a milk can. Above it, there was a part shaped like a pear. This pear part moved from side to side. From the milk can shape, white powder flowed out. It fell into a round bowl under it. One tentacle of the handling machine made the pear part move. With 2 flat hands like small shovels, the handling machine dug out lumps of clay. It threw the clay up into the pear part above. With another arm, it opened a little door again and again. It took out rusty, black pieces from the middle of the tool. These pieces looked burned like old coal waste. Another hard steel tentacle guided the white powder out of the round bowl. It sent the powder along a long channel with lines on it. The powder went toward a place I could not see, A mound of blue dust blocked my view of that place. From that hidden place, a thin line of green smoke went straight up into the calm air. While I watched, the handling machine made a soft, musical clinking sound. It stretched out one tentacle. A moment before, that tentacle looked like only a short, blunt part, but now it grew longer, like it could slide out in parts. It reached behind the mound of clay so I could not see the end. In another second, it lifted something into view. It was a white metal bar. It was clean and bright. It shone so strongly it almost hurt my eyes. The handling machine put this bar down on a growing stack of bars at the side of the pit. Between the time of sunset and the time of starlight, this clever machine must have made more than 100 bars like that. It made them from the rough clay. The mound of blue dust grew higher and higher. It rose until it reached the edge of the pit. The difference between the machines and the Martians was sharp. The machines moved fast and in a complex way. The Martians themselves were slow and clumsy. They lay there and panted. For many days I had to tell myself again and again that the Martians were the living ones, not the machines. The curate was at the slit when the first people were brought to the pit. I was below, sitting in the dark. I held myself tight. I listened with all my ears. The curate made a sudden movement back. I was afraid the Martians saw us. I crouched at once. My body froze with fear. He slid down the broken earth and stones. He crept beside me in the darkness. He could not speak in clear words. He waved his hands in a wild way. For a moment his fear became my fear too. His hands showed that he was giving up the slit. He wanted me to look. After some time, my curiosity became stronger than my fear. I stood up. I stepped across him. I climbed up to the slit. At first, I could not see why he had acted like that. Now it was twilight. The stars were small and faint, but the pit was lit by a strange green fire. The green fire came from the work of making the white metal bars. The whole scene was full of green light that jumped and moved. It was also full of rusty black shadows that shifted. This light and shadow hurt my eyes. Bats flew over and through the scene. They did not care about it at all. I could not see the Martians lying on the ground now. The mound of blue-green powder had risen and hid them. A fighting machine stood near one corner of the pit. Its legs were pulled in and bent. It looked lower than before, like it was resting. Then, under the loud noise of the machines, I began to think I heard human voices. At first, I told myself it was nothing. I pushed the idea away. I stayed crouched. I watched the fighting machine closely. For the first time, I felt sure that the hood did hold a Martian. When the green flames rose higher, I could see the shiny, oily look of his skin. I could also see the bright shine of his eyes. Then I heard a loud yell. At the same time, I saw a long tentacle move over the shoulder of the fighting machine. It reached to a small cage on the machine's back. Then something was lifted up. It struggled hard. It went up high against the sky. In the dark, it looked like a black shape with no clear meaning. It was a strange thing in the starlight. As the black shape came down again, the green light showed it more clearly. It was a man. For one short moment, I saw him well. He was a strong, red-faced, middle-aged man. He was well-dressed. Only 3 days before, he must have been walking and living a normal life. He looked like an important man. I saw his eyes wide open. I saw the shine on his shirt studs. I saw the shine on his watch chain. Then he dropped behind the mound, and I could not see him. For a moment there was silence. Then the man began to scream. At the same time, the Martians began to make their sound. It was a long, hooting sound. It sounded steady and almost cheerful. It made my blood turn cold. I slid down the broken stones and earth. I stood up and put my hands over my ears. I ran into the scullery. The curate had been crouched in the dark with his arms over his head. When I passed him, he looked up. He cried out loudly because I left him. Then he ran after me. That night we stayed in the scullery. We were pulled between two things. We felt horror, but we also felt a terrible need to look. I felt that I must do something. I felt we needed action, but I could not think of a plan to escape. I tried again and again. My mind went in circles. On the next day, the second day after that night, I could think more clearly. I looked at our situation in a calm way. I saw that the curate could not talk about plans at all. He could not discuss anything. This new horror had taken away the last part of his reason. It had taken away his ability to plan. In truth, he had fallen almost to the level of an animal. But I forced myself to be strong. I held myself like a man gripping himself with both hands. When I faced the facts, I saw one thing. Our situation was terrible, but it was not yet a reason to give up all hope. Our best chance was this. The Martians might use the pit only as a temporary place. They might leave later, or even if they stayed, they might not guard it all the time. If they did not guard it, we might find a moment to escape. I also thought carefully about digging a way out. I thought of digging away from the pit so we could come out in another place. But the risk seemed too high. We might come up in the open where a fighting machine could see us. Also, I would have to do all the digging alone. The curate would not help me. He would fail me for sure. On the third day, if I remember correctly, I saw a boy killed. It was the only time I truly saw the Martians feed. After I saw that, I stayed away from the hole for most of a full day. I could not bear looking. I went into the scullery. I took the door off. I used my hatchet and tried to dig. I did it as quietly as I could. I worked for hours. I made a hole about 2 feet deep. Then the loose earth fell in with a loud sound. I froze. I did not dare to dig more. I felt my courage go away. I lay on the floor for a long time. I had no will even to move. After that, I gave up the idea of digging out. I stopped it completely. The Martians had made such a deep mark on my mind that at first I had almost no hope that humans could defeat them. I did not think people could win. I did not think any human effort would throw them down. But on the 4th or 5th night, I heard something different. It was very late. The moon was bright. The Martians had taken away the digging machine. The pit was almost empty. There was only one fighting machine far away on the other side of the pit. There was also one handling machine. It was under my hole, in a corner of the pit where I could not see it well. The place was quiet. There was only the small clinking sound of the handling machine. There was also a faint pale light from it. On the ground were bars of white metal and patches of bright moonlight. The rest was dark. The night itself was calm and beautiful. The sky felt very still. Only one planet was there, and the moon seemed to have the sky to herself. Then I heard a dog howling. That sound was familiar. It made me listen harder. After that, I heard a deep booming sound. It sounded like very big guns. I heard it clearly. I counted 6 loud booms. Then there was a long wait. After that, I heard 6 more. Then it stopped. That was all. Chapter 4. The cylinder opens. On the 6th day of our imprisonment, I looked out through the slit for the last time. After that, I soon found myself alone at the slit. The curate did not stay close to me. He did not try to push me away from the opening. Instead, he went back into the scullery, the small room near the kitchen. This felt strange. A sudden thought came to me. I went back quickly, but I moved very quietly. I did not want to make any sound. In the darkness of the scullery, I heard the curate drinking. I reached out in the dark. My hand found a bottle. My fingers closed on it. It was a bottle of Burgundy wine. For a few minutes we fought for it. We pulled and pushed in the dark. Then the bottle hit the floor. It broke with a sharp sound. The wine ran out. I stopped fighting. I stood up. We stood there, breathing hard. We were both angry. We both made threats in low voices. In the end, I moved and stood between him and the food. I told him I would begin strict rules. I told him I would not let him eat whenever he wanted. I went to the pantry. I took the food there. I divided it into small parts. I made rations. I made them to last us 10 days. I told him he could not eat any more that day. In the afternoon, he tried again. He made a weak attempt to reach the food. I had been half asleep, but I woke at once. From then on, all day and all night, we sat facing each other. I was tired, but I stayed firm. He cried. He complained. He said he was hungry right now, and he could not wait. I know it was only one night and one day. But to me, it felt endless. It feels endless even now when I remember it. Our difference grew bigger and bigger. At last it became open fighting. For 2 long days we struggled. We did it in low voices. We wrestled. Sometimes I hit him. Sometimes I kicked him in wild anger. Sometimes I tried another way. Sometimes I spoke softly. Sometimes I tried to persuade him. Once I even tried to bribe him. I offered him the last bottle of Burgundy. I did this because there was a rainwater pump, and I could get water from it. So the wine was not as important as food, but nothing worked. Neither force nor kindness helped. He was beyond reason. He would not stop trying to get the food. He would not stop his noisy talking to himself. He kept babbling, again and again, with no care for danger. He would not follow even the simplest rules we needed so that we could live in that dark place. Slowly, I began to understand. His mind was broken. His intelligence was gone. My only companion in that close, bad, sick darkness was a man who had become insane. I have some weak memories of myself at that time. I think my own mind wandered sometimes too. When I slept, I had strange dreams. They were ugly and frightening. It sounds like a strange thing to say, but the curate's weakness and madness helped me. It warned me. It pushed me to stay strong. It made me hold on to sanity. It made me say to myself, again and again, I must not become like him. On the 8th day, he began to speak aloud. Before that, he had whispered. Now he used a normal voice. Nothing I did could make him speak more softly. He kept saying the same words many times. He said, "It is just, O God. It is just." He said that punishment should fall on him and his family. He said they had sinned. He said they had failed. He spoke about poverty and sorrow. He spoke about poor people being pushed down in the dust. He said he had stayed silent when he should have spoken. He said he had preached foolish things. He said, "My God, what foolish things." He said he should have stood up, even if he died, and told people to repent. He shouted the word repent again and again. He spoke about people who hurt the poor and needy. He spoke about God's winepress. His words poured out like dirty foam. They did not stop. Then suddenly, he would change. He would go back to the food. He would pray for it. He would beg. He would weep. At last, he would threaten me. His voice began to rise higher. I begged him not to do it. Then he saw something. He saw that he had power over me. He threatened to shout. He said he would shout loud and bring the Martians to us. For a short time, this threat scared me badly. But if I gave him more food, we would lose our chance to live. Any extra food he ate would shorten our days. It would take away our future. So I refused him. I stood against him. I defied him. Still, inside me, I did not feel safe. I did not feel sure he would not really do it. But that day, at least, he did not shout loud enough to call them. He kept talking. His voice kept rising slowly. He did this through most of the 8th day and the 9th day. He mixed threats and begging with his loud religious talk. He said he was sorry. He said he had served God in a false way. His words were half sane, but also foolish, and always too many. Sometimes I pitied him, even while I feared him. Then he slept for a short time. When he woke, he began again. He began with new strength. He spoke so loudly that I felt I must stop him. "Be still," I begged him. "Be still." He got on his knees. He had been sitting in the dark near the copper. He looked up. He said, "I have been still too long. Now I must speak. Now I must give my witness." Then he spoke louder. His voice was strong. It sounded like it could reach the pit. He cried out warnings. He cried out, "Woe!" He cried out, "Woe!" again and again. He spoke as if he was preaching to a city. He spoke as if he was calling down judgment. He said many woe words, one after another. I stood up fast. Fear hit me like fire. I said, "Shut up." I begged him again, for God's sake. But he did not stop. He shouted at the top of his voice. He stood up too. He stretched out his arms. He said that God's word was on him and he must speak it. In 3 fast steps, he reached the door that led into the kitchen. He shouted that he must go. He said he must give his witness. He said it had been delayed too long already. I reached out my hand in the darkness. I felt the meat chopper hanging on the wall. In one instant I ran after him. I was wild with fear. I was not thinking of him as a man. I was thinking of the Martians hearing him. Before he got halfway across the kitchen, I caught him. For one last moment, I tried to keep some humanity. I turned the blade back. I did not cut him. I struck him with the butt of the chopper. He fell forward. He went down hard. He lay stretched out on the floor. I stumbled over him. I stood there, breathing fast and hard. He did not move. Then, suddenly, I heard a sound outside. It was the sound of running and smashing plaster. Something slipped and broke. At the same time, the triangular opening in the wall became dark. Something blocked the light. I looked up. I saw the lower part of a handling machine moving slowly across the hole. One gripping limb curled in the broken rubble. Another limb came into view. It felt its way over fallen beams. I could not move. I stood like stone. I stared. Then I saw, through a kind of glass plate near the edge of the machine, the face of a Martian, as we may call it. I saw its large, dark eyes. It peered in. Then a long metal tentacle, like a metal snake, came slowly through the hole. It felt its way into the room. With effort, I turned away. I stumbled over the curate's body. I reached the scullery door. I stopped there for one short second. The tentacle was already far inside the room, maybe 2 yards or more. It twisted and turned. It moved with strange sudden jerks. It went this way and that. For a moment I was caught by it. I watched it like a person in a bad dream. Then I gave a faint, rough cry. I forced myself to move. I crossed the scullery. I trembled so much I could barely stand. I opened the coal cellar door. I stepped into the coal cellar and stood in the darkness. I looked back at the faint light of the kitchen door. I listened with all my ears. Had the Martian seen me? What was it doing now? Something moved back and forth very quietly. Now and then it tapped the wall. Now and then it started again with a soft metal ringing sound, like keys moving on a ring. Then I heard a heavy body being dragged across the kitchen floor. I knew what it was. It was the curate. The body was dragged toward the opening. I could not help myself. I crept to the coal cellar door. I peeped into the kitchen. In the triangle of bright sunlight outside, I saw the Martian in its many-armed handling machine. It was looking closely at the curate's head. It was inspecting him. At once a thought hit me. I thought the Martian would guess I was there. I thought it would see the mark from my blow. I thought it would know there was another person. I crept back into the coal cellar. I shut the door. I began to hide myself. I covered myself as much as I could. I did it as quietly as possible. I pulled firewood and coal around me in the dark. I tried to become part of the pile. Again and again I stopped. I stayed stiff and still. I listened for the tentacle to come back into the cellar. Then I heard the faint metal jingle again. It moved slowly over the kitchen floor. Then it came nearer. I judged it was now in the scullery. I thought maybe its length is not enough to reach me. I prayed many prayers. I prayed in a desperate way. The tentacle scraped across the coal cellar door. It passed along it. It made a faint sound. Then came a time that felt like a long age. I waited in almost unbearable fear. Then I heard it fumbling at the latch. It had found the latch. It had found the door. The Martians understood doors. It worked at the latch for a minute maybe. Then the door opened. In the dark I could just see the tentacle. It was like an elephant's trunk. It waved toward me. It touched things. It examined the wall. It touched coal and wood. It reached up to the ceiling. It felt everything. It was like a black worm. It moved its blind head from side to side. Once it touched my boot. It touched the heel. I almost screamed. I was right on the edge of screaming. I bit my hand hard to stop myself. For a time the tentacle was still. I thought, maybe it has gone away. Maybe it has pulled back. Then with a sudden click it grabbed something. My heart jumped. I thought it had grabbed me, but it did not. It seemed to go out again. For 1 minute I was not sure what had happened. Then I understood. It had taken a lump of coal. It was taking coal to examine it. I used that moment. I shifted my body a little. I was cramped and in pain. I moved only a tiny bit. Then I froze again and listened. I whispered prayers. I whispered them with strong feeling, like a person drowning. Then I heard the slow sound again. It came back. It came creeping toward me again. Slowly, slowly it came. It scratched the walls. It tapped things in the room. I was not even sure where it was. I did not know if it was inside or outside. Then it rapped sharply on the cellar door. After that, it closed the cellar door. I heard it go into the pantry. I heard biscuit tins rattle. I heard a bottle smash. Then I heard a heavy bump against the cellar door. Then there was silence. The silence felt endless. Had it gone? At last I decided it had gone. I waited. I listened. I did not hear it return to the scullery, but I did not come out. All the 10th day I stayed in the coal cellar. I lay there in the close dark. I stayed buried among coal and firewood. I did not dare to crawl out. I did not dare even to get a drink, though my throat burned with thirst. It was the 11th day before I dared to go out that far from my hiding place. Chapter 5. The Heat Ray. Before I went into the pantry, my first act was to fasten the door between the kitchen and the scullery. But when I went into the pantry, I found it empty. Every bit of food was gone. It seemed the Martian had taken it all the day before. When I saw that, I despaired for the first time. On the 11th day and the 12th day, I ate nothing. I drank nothing either. At first, my mouth and throat were very dry. My strength went away, little by little. I sat in the dark scullery feeling miserable and hopeless. My mind stayed on food. I kept thinking about eating. The noises from the pit had stopped completely. I thought I had become deaf. I did not feel strong enough to crawl quietly to the peephole, or I would have tried to look. On the 12th day, my throat hurt so much that I took a risk. I knew the noise might bring the Martians, but I went to the rainwater pump by the sink. It creaked loudly. I worked at it and got 2 glassfuls of rainwater. The water was dark and dirty, and it tasted bad. Still, it made me feel much better. I also felt braver because no searching tentacle came after the noise of my pumping. During these days, I thought a lot about the curate. I thought about him in a wandering way. I thought about how he died. My thoughts went in circles and did not come to a clear end. On the 13th day, I drank more water. I dozed. I woke. I thought in broken pieces about food and about impossible plans to escape. Whenever I slept, I had terrible dreams. Sometimes I dreamed of the curate's death. Sometimes I dreamed of rich dinners. But asleep or awake, I felt sharp pain inside me that made me want to drink again and again. The light in the scullery was no longer gray. It was red. In my confused mind, it looked like the color of blood. On the 14th day, I went into the kitchen. I was surprised. The red weed had grown across the hole in the wall. Its red leaves and branches covered the opening. It turned the half-light of the kitchen into a dark crimson gloom. Early on the 15th day, I heard a strange but familiar sound in the kitchen. I listened and knew what it was. It was a dog. I heard snuffing and scratching. I went into the kitchen and saw a dog's nose pushing in through a gap in the red plants. This shocked me. When the dog smelled me, it barked once, short and sharp. I thought of 2 things at once. If I could make the dog come in quietly, I might be able to kill it and eat it. Also, I might need to kill it anyway, because its barking might bring the Martians. I crept forward and whispered, "Good dog," very softly. But the dog pulled back at once. Its nose disappeared. It ran away. I listened again. I was not deaf. The pit was still. I heard only a sound like a bird's wings fluttering and a rough croaking sound, but nothing more. For a long time I lay close to the peephole. I did not dare to move the red plants aside. Once or twice I heard a faint patter, like the dog's feet moving back and forth on sand far below. I heard more bird sounds, but that was all. At last the silence gave me courage. I looked out. In the corner of the pit, many crows hopped and fought over bones. These were the skeletons of the dead people the Martians had eaten, but aside from those birds, there was no living thing in the pit. I stared, not believing what I saw. All the machines were gone. Everything the Martians used had vanished. Only a big mound of gray-blue powder remained in one corner. In another place there were bars of aluminium. There were also the blackbirds and the bones. But the pit itself was empty. It was only a great round hole in the sand. Slowly I pushed myself out through the red weed. I stood on the mound of broken rubble. I looked in every direction except behind me to the north. I saw no Martians. I saw no sign of them. The pit dropped straight down at my feet. But a little farther along the ruins there was a slope I could climb. It led up to the top of the wreckage. My chance had come. I began to shake. My hands trembled. I waited for some time, not able to decide. Then a wave of desperate courage came over me. My heart beat hard. I climbed up to the top of the mound where I had been buried for so long. I looked around again. Even to the north, no Martian was visible. When I had last seen this part of Sheen in daylight, it had been a loose line of comfortable houses, white and red with many shady trees between them. Now it was ruined. I stood on a hill of smashed bricks, clay and gravel. Red cactus-shaped plants grew everywhere. They came up to my knees. There was not one normal green plant left to fight them. Near me, the trees were dead and brown. Farther away, red threads climbed over some stems that were still alive. The nearby houses were all broken, but they were not burned. Walls still stood, sometimes up to the second floor. Windows were smashed. Doors were broken. Inside the roofless rooms, the red weed grew wild. Below me was the great pit, with crows fighting over scraps and bones. Other birds hopped among the ruins. Far away I saw a thin cat moving low along a wall. It crept like a shadow, but I saw no people. I saw no sign of men. After the dark days inside, the day outside looked painfully bright. The sky was shining blue. A light wind moved the red weed. It made the plants sway gently over every open piece of ground, and the air felt so sweet. The smell of clean air was almost too much for me. Chapter 6. The Heat Ray in the Chubam Road. For a while I stood shaking on the mound and did not think of safety. Inside that foul hiding place my thoughts had been narrow. I had thought only of staying alive from one moment to the next. I had not understood what was happening to the world outside. I had not imagined I would see something like this. I expected Sheen in ruins. Instead, all around me was a strange landscape, bright and frightening, like the surface of another planet. In that moment, I felt something beyond normal human feeling, but something that the animals we rule must feel often. I felt like a rabbit returning to its hole and finding men digging a house there. I felt, for the first time, the beginning of a new idea. Later, it became very clear in my mind, and it oppressed me for many days. I felt I had been pushed down from my place. I felt I was not a master anymore. I felt like only an animal among animals, under the Martian foot. For humans now it would be like it is for animals. We would hide and watch. We would run and hide again. The fear and power of man had ended. But when this strange feeling passed, another thing took over. I was hungry. My long fast was now the strongest force in me. Away from the pit, I saw something helpful. Beyond a wall covered with red weed, I saw a patch of garden ground that was not buried. This gave me hope. I went toward it, walking in the red weed. Sometimes it came up to my knees. Sometimes it came up to my neck. The thick plants made me feel hidden, and that comforted me. The wall was about 6 feet high. I tried to climb it, but I could not lift my feet high enough. So I walked along beside the wall until I reached a corner. There I found rocks and a garden rockwork. That let me climb up. I got to the top and tumbled down into the garden I wanted. In that garden I found food. I found some young onions. I found 2 gladiolus bulbs. I found many small carrots that were not fully grown. I took them all. Then I climbed over a broken wall and went on. I walked through red and dark red trees toward Q. It looked like walking through a road of giant drops of blood. 2 thoughts filled me. One was to find more food. The other was to limp away, as soon and as far as my strength allowed, from this cursed, strange region near the pit. Farther on, in a grassy place, I found a group of mushrooms. I ate them too. Then I came to a wide sheet of shallow moving water in a place that used to be meadows. These small foods only made my hunger sharper. At first, I was surprised to see so much water in a hot, dry summer, but later I learned why. The red weed had grown like plants in the tropics. When this strange plant found water, it grew huge at once. It made many seeds, more than anything I had seen. Its seeds poured into the rivers, the Wey and the Thames. Its water fronds grew fast and large and soon choked those rivers. Later I saw that at Putney the bridge was almost lost in a thick tangle of weed. At Richmond the Thames ran wide and shallow over the meadows of Hampton and Twickenham. As the water spread, the weeds spread with it. For a time, ruined houses in the Thames Valley were hidden in a red swamp. I walked along the edge of that swamp. Much of the damage the Martians had made was hidden by it. In the end, the red weed died almost as fast as it had spread. A rotting disease attacked it. People believed this was caused by bacteria. On Earth, plants have learned to resist many bacterial diseases. They do not die quickly. They fight. But the red weed did not fight. It rotted like something already dead. Its fronds turned pale, then dry and brittle. They broke off with the lightest touch. The water that helped it grow at first carried the last pieces of it out to sea. When I reached the water, my first act was to drink. I drank a lot. Then, from a sudden impulse, I chewed some red weed fronds. But they were mostly water. They tasted sickly and metallic. The water was shallow enough for me to wade safely. Still, the weed tangled around my feet and slowed me. I saw the flood grew deeper toward the river, so I turned back toward Mortlake. I found the road again by signs. I saw broken fences. I saw ruined villas. I saw lamp posts. These helped me follow the old way. Soon I got out of the flooded area. I went up the hill toward Roehampton. Then I reached Putney Common. Here the view changed. It was less strange. It was more like broken England. Some places looked as if a great storm had torn them apart. But only a short walk away there were places that looked normal. Some houses stood untouched. Their blinds were neatly down. Their doors were shut. It looked as if the owners had left only for a day, or as if the people inside were asleep. There was less red weed here. The tall trees along the lane did not have the red creeper on them. I looked for food among the trees and found nothing. I also went into 2 silent houses, but others had already broken in. They were empty and ruined inside. I rested for the rest of the daylight in bushes. I was weak. I was too tired to go on. All this time I saw no people. I also saw no Martians. I met 2 dogs that looked hungry, but when I moved toward them, they ran away in a wide curve. Near Roehampton, I saw 2 human skeletons, not bodies, but clean bones. In the wood near me, I found broken bones of cats and rabbits and the skull of a sheep. I put some of these bones in my mouth and chewed them, but there was nothing to eat from them. After sunset, I moved on toward Putney. I think the heat ray had been used there for some reason. In a garden beyond Roehampton, I found many small potatoes, not fully grown. They were enough to quiet my hunger. From that garden I could look down over Putney and the river. In the dusk it looked terribly empty. Trees were black and dead. Ruins were black and empty. Down the hill the flooded river lay in wide sheets of water. The water was tinged red by the weed, and over everything there was silence. That silence filled me with a fear I cannot describe. It made me think how fast the change had come and how complete it was. For a time I believed all people were gone. I believed mankind had been wiped out. I believed I was alone, the last man alive. Near the top of Putney Hill, I found another skeleton. Its arms were torn away and lay far from the rest. As I walked on, I became more and more sure that except for a few lonely survivors like me, humans in this part of the world were already finished. I thought the Martians had moved on. I thought they had left this land empty and dead and were now seeking food somewhere else. Perhaps, I thought, they were destroying Berlin or Paris right now, or maybe they had gone north. Chapter 7. How I Reached Home. I spent that night in the inn at the top of Putney Hill. It was the first time since I ran away to Leatherhead that I slept in a real bed. I will not tell all the useless trouble I had when I broke into the house. Later, I found that the front door was not even locked. I searched every room for food. At last, when I was almost in despair, I found in what seemed to be a servant's bedroom a piece of bread that rats had bitten and 2 tins of pineapple. Someone had already searched the place and taken almost everything. Later in the bar, I found some biscuits and some sandwiches that had been missed. I could not eat the sandwiches because they were too bad, but the biscuits stopped my hunger, and I filled my pockets with them. I did not light any lamps. I was afraid that a Martian might come through that part of London in the night, looking for food. Before I went to bed, I could not rest. I walked from window to window and looked out, trying to see some sign of the monsters. I slept only a little. As I lay in bed, I found that I could think clearly and in order again. I do not remember doing that since my last argument with the curate. During all the time between, my mind had been full of quick, unclear feelings, or else I had been dull and empty. But in the night, I think because I had eaten, my brain grew clear again and I began to think. 3 things fought for my mind. One was the killing of the curate. One was where the Martians were. One was what had happened, or might have happened, to my wife. When I remembered the curate's death, I felt no horror and no true remorse. I saw it only as something that had happened. It was a memory that was deeply unpleasant, but it did not have the feeling of remorse. I saw myself then as I see myself now, pushed step by step toward that quick blow, made to do it by a chain of events that led to it. I did not condemn myself. Yet the memory stayed there and would not move on. In the quiet of the night, with that feeling of God being near that sometimes comes in darkness and silence, I judged myself for that one moment of anger and fear. I went back in my mind over every part of our talk, from the moment when I found him crouching near me, not caring about my thirst, and pointing to the fire and smoke rising from ruined Weybridge. We had not been able to work together, and Chance had not cared about that. If I had known what would happen, I would have left him at Halliford. But I did not know, and crime is to know before and still do the thing. I write this down exactly as I write all the rest as it happened. There were no witnesses. I could have hidden all this if I had wanted, but I write it, and the reader must judge me as he likes. Then, when I had pushed away that picture of the body lying there, I had to face the Martians and the possible fate of my wife. About the Martians I knew nothing certain. I could imagine 100 things, and sadly, I could imagine 100 things about my wife too. Then, all at once, the night became terrible. I found myself sitting up in bed and staring into the dark. I found myself praying that the heat ray had struck her suddenly and without pain. Since the night when I came back from Leatherhead, I had not really prayed. I had said prayers. I had used prayer like a charm, the way frightened people repeat words in danger. But now I really prayed, steadily and clearly, face to face with the darkness of God. It was a strange night. Strangest of all was this. As soon as morning came, I, who had spoken with God, left the house like a rat coming out of its hole. I was just a small creature, not much more than an animal, something that our masters might hunt and kill for any passing wish. Perhaps they also prayed to God with confidence. Surely, if this war has taught us nothing else, it has taught us pity. Pity for those poor, unthinking creatures that suffer under our power. The morning was bright and beautiful. The sky in the east was pink with small golden clouds. On the road that runs from the top of Putney Hill to Wimbledon, there were still poor remains of the great crowd that must have rushed toward London on Sunday night after the fighting began. There was a small cart with 2 wheels. On it was painted, Thomas Lobb, greengrocer, New Malden. One wheel was broken. Near it was an abandoned tin trunk. There was also a straw hat pressed deep into the mud, which had now become hard. At the top of West Hill there was broken glass stained with blood near an overturned water trough. I moved slowly, and my plans were very unclear. I thought of going to Leatherhead, though I knew I had little chance of finding my wife there. Surely, unless death had come on them very suddenly, my cousins and she would have run away from that place. But I thought that perhaps there I might find some sign of where the people of Surrey had gone. I knew that I wanted to find my wife. My heart ached for her and for the world of men, but I had no clear idea how I could find her. I also felt very sharply how alone I was. From the corner I went, under the cover of trees and bushes, to the edge of Wimbledon Common, which stretched wide and far. The dark open land was bright in places with yellow gorse and broom. There was no red weed there. As I moved slowly and with doubt near the edge of the open ground, the sun rose and filled everything with light and life. In a wet place among the trees, I found a busy crowd of little frogs. I stopped to watch them, and I took a lesson from their strong wish to live. Then, a little later, I turned suddenly because I felt, strangely, that I was being watched. I saw something crouching among a group of bushes. I stood and looked at it. I took one step toward it, and it rose and became a man with a cutlass in his hand. I went toward him slowly. He stood still and silent, looking at me. As I came closer, I saw that his clothes were as dusty and dirty as mine. Indeed, he looked as if he had been dragged through a drain. Closer still, I saw the green slime of ditches mixed with the pale dry clay and the shining black marks of coal dirt. His black hair fell over his eyes. His face was dark, dirty, and thin. At first I did not know him. There was a red cut across the lower part of his face. "Stop!" he cried when I was about 10 yards away. I stopped. His voice was rough. "Where do you come from?" he said. I thought for a moment as I looked at him. "I come from Mortlake," I said. "I was buried near the pit the Martians made around their cylinder. I worked my way out and escaped." "There is no food here," he said. "This is my place. All this hill down to the river, back to Clapham, and up to the edge of the common. There is only food for one. Which way are you going?" I answered slowly. "I do not know," I said. "I have been buried in the ruins of a house for 13 or 14 days. I do not know what has happened." He looked at me with doubt, then suddenly started, and his face changed. "I do not want to stay here," I said. "I think I will go to Leatherhead because my wife was there." He pointed at me sharply. "It is you," he said, "the man from Woking, and you were not killed at Weybridge?" At that same moment I knew him too. "You are the artilleryman who came into my garden." "Good luck," he said. "We are lucky men. Fancy meeting you." He held out his hand, and I took it. "I crawled up a drain," he said. "But they did not kill everyone. After they went away, I escaped toward Walton, across the fields. But, well, it has not even been 16 days in all, and your hair is gray." Suddenly he looked over his shoulder. "Only a rook," he said. "These days one learns that birds make shadows too. This place is too open. Let us crawl under those bushes and talk." "Have you seen any Martians?" I said. "Since I crawled out." "They have gone away across London," he said. "I think they have a bigger camp there. At night, over there, near Hampstead, the sky is full of their lights. It is like a great city. In that light you can just see them moving. In the daytime you cannot. But nearby, I have not seen them for—" He counted on his fingers. 5 days. Then I saw 2 of them over near Hammersmith carrying something big. And the night before last, he stopped and spoke very seriously. It was only lights, but there was something in the air. I believe they have built a flying machine and they are learning to fly. I stopped on my hands and knees because by then we had reached the bushes. "Fly!" "Yes," he said. "Fly." I went into a little space under the branches and sat down. "It is all over for mankind," I said. "If they can do that, they will simply go around the whole world." He nodded. "They will, but it may make things a little easier here for a time. And besides—" He looked at me. "Are you not sure now that it is finished for mankind? I am. We are down. We are beaten." I stared at him. Strange as it may sound, I had not yet fully reached that fact, though it was clear the moment he spoke it. I had still kept some vague hope, or perhaps only an old habit of mind. He said it again. "We are beaten." Those words carried complete truth. "It is all over," he said. "They have lost one, only one, and still they have made their place here, and broken the greatest power in the world. They have walked over us. The death of that one at Weybridge was an accident, and these are only the first of them. They kept coming. Those green stars, I have seen none for 5 or 6 days now, but I have no doubt that more are falling somewhere every night. Nothing can be done. We are under them. We are beaten. I did not answer him. I sat and stared ahead, trying without success to find some thought to fight against his. "This is not a war," said the artilleryman. "It never was a war, any more than there is a war between men and ants." At once I remembered the night at the observatory. "After the 10th shot they fired no more," I said, "at least until the first cylinder came." "How do you know?" said the artilleryman. I explained. He thought for a moment. "Something was wrong with the gun," he said. "But what does that matter? They will fix it. And even if there is some delay, how can that change the end? It is just men and ants. The ants build their cities, live their lives, have wars and changes until men want them out of the way, and then they are swept away. That is what we are now, only ants, only—" "Yes," I said, "we are ants that can be eaten." We sat there looking at each other. "And what will they do with us?" I said. "That is what I have been thinking about," he said. "That is what I have been thinking. After Weybridge, I went south, thinking. I saw what was happening. Most people were doing nothing but screaming and making excitement, but I do not like screaming. I have seen death once or twice. I am not some show soldier. At the best and the worst, death is only death. The man who keeps thinking is the man who gets through. I saw everyone moving away to the south. I said to myself, food will not last if everyone goes that way. And I turned back. I went toward the Martians, the way a sparrow goes toward a man, all around. He moved his hand toward the horizon. People are starving in crowds, running, stepping on one another. He saw my face and stopped awkwardly, and "No doubt many people with money have gone away to France," he said. He seemed to wonder if he should say sorry, but then he met my eyes and went on. "There is food all around here, tinned food in shops, wine, spirits, mineral water, and the water pipes and the drains are empty. Well, I was telling you what I thought. Here are intelligent creatures," I said, "and it looks as if they want us for food. First, they will destroy us. Ships, machines, guns, cities, all order and all organization, all that will go. If we were as small as ants, perhaps we might survive, but we are not. We are too large. We are too easy to stop. That is the first certainty." "Yes?" I agreed. "Yes, that is true. I have thought it out." "Very well, then next. Right now they catch us whenever they want. A Martian only has to go a few miles to put a crowd to flight. And one day, I saw one out near Wandsworth pulling houses to pieces and searching in the ruins, but they will not keep doing that. As soon as they have destroyed all our guns and ships, and smashed the railways, and done all the things they are doing over there, then they will begin catching us in an orderly way, choosing the best of us and keeping us in cages and places like that. That is what they will begin to do soon. Lord, they have not even really begun with us yet. Can you not see that?" "Not begun," I cried. "Not begun. Everything that has happened until now is because we had no sense to keep quiet. We worried them with guns and all that foolishness. We lost our heads and ran in crowds to places that were no safer than the ones we left. They do not want to trouble with us yet. They are making their own things. They are making all the things they could not bring with them. They are getting ready for the rest of their people. Very likely, that is why the cylinders have stopped falling for a while. They may be afraid of hitting the Martians already here, and instead of running about blindly or trying to blow them up with dynamite on the off chance, we have to make ourselves ready for the new world. That is how I see it. It is not what a man wants for his kind, but it is where the facts lead. And that is the rule I have followed. Cities, nations, civilization, progress. It is all finished. That game is done. We are beaten. "But if that is true," I said, "what is there to live for?" The artilleryman looked at me for a moment. "There will not be any blessed concerts for 1,000,000 years or so. There will be no Royal Academy of Arts, and no nice little meals in restaurants. If amusement is what you want, then yes, the game is finished. If you care about drawing room manners, or about not eating peas with a knife, or about speaking properly, then you had better throw all that away. It is of no use now. You mean... I mean that men like me are going to live on, for the sake of the race. I tell you, I am firmly set on living, and if I am not mistaken, before long you will show what strength you have inside too. We are not going to be wiped out, and I do not mean to be caught either, and tamed and fed and bred like some huge ox. Ah, think of those brown creepers. You do not mean to say... I do. I am going on living under their feet. I have planned it. I have thought it out. Men are beaten. We do not know enough. We have to learn before we can have any chance. And while we learn, we have to stay alive and stay free. Do you see? That is what has to be done. I stared at him, full of surprise and deeply moved by his strong will. Great God! I cried. You are truly a man. And suddenly I took his hand. Eh, he said, and his eyes shone. I have thought it out. Have I not? Go on, I said. Well, those who want to escape being caught must get ready. I am getting ready. Understand, not all of us are made for the life of wild animals, and that is what we must become. That is why I watched you. I had my doubts. You are thin. I did not know it was you, and I did not know how you had come out from being buried. All these people, the sort who used to live in these houses, and all those little clerks who used to live down that way, they would be no good. They have no spirit. They have no proud dreams and no strong desires. And a man who has neither one nor the other, Lord, what is he except fear and caution? They used to rush off to work, I have seen hundreds of them, with a bit of breakfast in the hand, running fast and shiny-faced to catch their little train ticket ride, afraid they would lose their job if they were late. They worked in businesses they were too afraid even to understand. Then they rushed home for fear of missing dinner. After dinner they stayed indoors because they feared the dark streets, and they slept with the wives they married, not because they wanted them, but because the wives had a little money and made life safer in their one small, frightened run through the world. Their lives were insured. They had a little money put away for fear of accidents, and on Sundays they feared the next world, as if hell were made for rabbits. Well, the Martians will be a blessing to such people. Nice big cages, good fat food, careful breeding, no worry. After a week or two of running about in fields and roads with empty stomachs, they will come and let themselves be caught gladly. After a while, they will be pleased. They will wonder what people ever did before Martians came to look after them. And the men who waste time in bars, and the vain ones, and the singers, I can imagine them. I can imagine them, he said, with a dark kind of pleasure. There will be endless feeling and religion among them. There are hundreds of things that I saw with my own eyes that I have only begun to understand in these last few days. Many people will accept things as they are, fat and stupid, and many others will be troubled by a feeling that all this is wrong and that they ought to do something. Now, whenever many people feel that they ought to do something, the weak ones, and those who grow weak from too much confused thinking, always turn to some kind of do-nothing religion. They become very holy and superior and accept suffering and the will of the Lord. Very likely you have seen the same thing. It is energy in a storm of fear, turned completely inside out. Those cages will be full of psalms and hymns and pious words, and people of another kind will mix in a little, erotic feeling. He stopped. Very likely the Martians will keep some of them as pets. They may train them to do tricks. Who knows? They may grow fond of the pet boy when he grows up and then have to kill him. And some, perhaps, they will train to hunt us. No, I cried. That is impossible. No human being... What is the use of saying such lies? Said the artilleryman. There are men who would do it gladly. It is foolish to pretend there are not. And I gave way to his certainty. If they come after me, he said, Lord, if they come after me. Then he fell into grim thought. I sat there thinking over all this. I could find nothing to say against his reasoning. Before the invasion, no one would have doubted that I was more intelligent than he was. I, a known writer on subjects of philosophy, and he, only a common soldier. Yet he had already shaped an understanding of the situation that I had hardly even seen. "What are you doing?" I asked after a while. "What plans have you made?" He paused. "Well, it is like this," he said. "What do we have to do? We have to invent a kind of life in which men can live and have children and be safe enough to raise them. Yes, wait a little, and I will make it clearer. The tame ones will go the way of all tame animals. After a few generations, they will become big, beautiful, full-blooded, stupid, rubbish. The danger is that we who stay wild will become savage too, will turn into something like big, savage rats. You see, the way I mean to live is underground. I have been thinking about the drains. Of course, people who do not know drains think only terrible things. But under London there are miles and miles of them, hundreds of miles. And after a few days of rain, with London empty, they will be sweet and clean. The main drains are big enough and airy enough for anyone. Then there are cellars, vaults, and stores, and we can make passages from them into the drains. And there are railway tunnels and underground passages too. Eh? You begin to see? Then we form a band, able-bodied men, clean-minded men. We are not going to gather any rubbish that happens to come along. Weak ones go out again. As you meant me to go? Well, I did talk with you first, did I not? We will not argue about that. Go on. Those who stay will obey orders. We will need able-bodied and clean-minded women too. Women to be mothers and teachers. No lazy ladies, no silly eye-rolling women. We cannot have weak or foolish people. Life is serious again. The useless, the heavy, and the harmful must die. They ought to die. They ought to be willing to die. After all, it is a kind of disloyalty to live on and spoil the race, and they cannot be happy. Also, dying is not so terrible. It is the fear of it that makes it bad, and in all those underground places we will gather. Our district will be London, and perhaps sometimes we will be able to watch and run about above ground when the Martians are away. Play cricket, perhaps. That is how we will save the race. Eh? It is possible, is it not? But saving the race is not enough by itself. As I said, that would only make us rats. The real thing is to save our knowledge and add to it. That is where men like you are needed. There are books. There are models. We must make great safe places deep down and get all the books we can. Not novels and poetry stuff, but ideas, science books. That is where men like you come in. We must go to the British Museum and choose all those books carefully. Above all, we must keep science alive and learn more. We must watch the Martians. Some of us must become spies. Perhaps when it is all working well, I will do that myself. I mean, I will let myself be caught. And the great thing is this: we must leave the Martians alone. We must not even steal from them. If we get in their way, we must get out of it. We must show them that we mean no harm. Yes, I know. But they are intelligent creatures, and they will not hunt us down if they have everything they want and think we are only harmless vermin. The artilleryman stopped and put his brown hand on my arm. After all, perhaps we may not have so much to learn before. Just imagine this: 4 or 5 of their fighting machines suddenly starting off, with heat rays to right and left, and no Martian inside them. No Martian inside them, but men. Men who have learned how to work them. It may happen in my own lifetime even. Think of having one of those beautiful machines, with its heat ray free and wide. Think of controlling it. What would it matter if you were smashed to pieces at the end, after one great attack like that? I believe the Martians would open their beautiful eyes then. Can you not see them, man? Can you not see them running, blowing and hooting to their other machines? Something wrong everywhere, and swish, bang, rattle, swish, and just while they are trying to fix it, swish comes the heat ray, and then man has returned to his own place. For a time, the artilleryman's daring imagination and the certainty and courage in his voice fully ruled my mind. I believed without question both in his picture of the future of mankind and in the possibility of his astonishing plan. If the reader thinks me too easy to persuade and foolish, he must compare his own position, sitting safely and reading with calm thoughts, with mine, crouching in the bushes, afraid, distracted, and listening. We talked in this way through the early morning. Later we came out from the bushes and, after looking carefully at the sky for Martians, hurried quickly to the house on Putney Hill where he had his shelter. It was in the coal cellar, and when I saw the work he had spent a week on, it was a hole not even 10 yards long, which he meant to dig until it reached the main drain under Putney Hill. I first understood the great distance between his dreams and his actual power. I could have dug such a hole in one day, but I still believed in him enough to work with him all that morning, until after midday, digging. We had a garden wheelbarrow, and through the earth we dug out against the kitchen range. We refreshed ourselves with a tin of mock turtle soup and wine from the next pantry. In this steady work I found a strange relief from the painful strangeness of the world. While we worked, I thought over his plan, and little by little doubts and objections began to rise in my mind. But I worked there all morning because I was so glad to have a purpose again. After an hour of work, I began to think about how far it might be to the sewer and whether we might miss it completely. My first practical difficulty was this: why should we dig this long tunnel when we might enter the drain at once through one of the manholes and then work back toward the house? It also seemed to me that the house was badly chosen and would require a tunnel longer than necessary. And just as I was beginning to face these thoughts clearly, the artilleryman stopped digging and looked at me. "We are working well," he said. He put down his spade. "Let us stop for a bit," he said. "I think it is time to look out from the roof of the house." I wanted to keep working, and after a little pause he took up the spade again. Then suddenly a thought struck me. I stopped, and he stopped at once. "Why were you walking on the common," I said, "instead of being here?" "Getting some air," he said. "I was coming back. It is safer by night." "But the work?" "Oh, one cannot always work," he said. And in that instant I saw the man clearly. He hesitated, still holding his spade. "We ought to look around now," he said, "because if any of them come near, they may hear the spades and fall on us without warning." I no longer wished to argue. We went together to the roof and stood on a ladder, looking out through the roof door. There were no Martians to be seen, so we dared to climb out onto the roof tiles and slip down behind the protection of the low wall. From there, a group of bushes hid most of Putney, but we could see the river below. It was a bubbling mass of red weed. We could also see the low parts of Lambeth, flooded and red. The red weed climbed over the trees near the old palace. Their branches stretched out thin and dead from among its masses, with dry leaves hanging on them. It was strange how completely both these things depended on flowing water to spread. Around us neither had begun to grow. Golden chain trees, pink may, snowball bushes, and arbor vitae rose bright and green in the sunlight among laurels and hydrangeas. Beyond Kensington, thick smoke was rising, and that, together with a blue mist, hid the hills to the north. The artillerymen began to tell me about the kind of people who still stayed in London. "One night last week," he said, "some fools got the electric light working again, and then all Regent Street and the circus were full of light, crowded with painted and ragged, drunk men and women, dancing and shouting until morning. A man who was there told me. And when day came, they saw that a fighting machine had been standing near the Langham and looking down at them. God knows how long it had been there. It must have frightened some of them badly. It came down the road toward them and picked up nearly 100 who were too drunk or too frightened to run." What a strange, shining picture of a time that no history will ever fully describe. Then, In answer to my questions, he returned to his great plans. He became excited again. He spoke so well of the possibility of capturing a fighting machine that I more than half believed in him again. But now I had begun to understand what kind of man he was, and I could see how much he liked to say that nothing should be done too quickly. And I noticed that now there was no question at all that he himself would be the one to capture and use the great machine. After a time, we went down to the cellar. Neither of us seemed ready to begin digging again, and when he suggested that we should eat, I was quite willing. Suddenly, he became very generous, and after we had eaten, he went away and came back with some very good cigars. We lit them, and his hopeful mood grew warm again. He seemed to think that my arrival was a great event. "There is some champagne in the cellar," he said. "We can dig better on this Thames-side Burgundy," I said. "No," he said. "Today I am the host. Champagne. Great God, we have a hard enough task before us. Let us rest and gather strength while we can. Look at these blistered hands." And with this idea of making a holiday of it, he insisted that we play cards after the meal. He taught me euchre. Then, after we had divided London between us, I taking the north and he the south, we played for parish points. This may seem strange and foolish to the calm reader, but it is completely true. And what is more strange, I found that card game and others we played after it extremely interesting. Strange is the mind of man. While our whole race stood on the edge of destruction or terrible slavery, while we had no clear future except perhaps a horrible death, we could still sit there following the turns of painted cards and taking real pleasure in playing the joker. After that he taught me poker, and I beat him in 3 hard games of chess. When darkness came, we decided to take the risk and lit a lamp. After a very long line of games, we had supper, and the artillerymen finished the champagne. We went on smoking our cigars. He was no longer the energetic savior of mankind whom I had met in the morning. He was still hopeful, but it was a slower, more thoughtful hope. I remember that in the end he proposed my health in a speech that had little variety and many pauses. I took a cigar and went upstairs to look at the lights he had spoken of, the lights that shone so green along the Highgate hills. At first I looked stupidly across the valley of London. The northern hills were hidden in darkness, the fires near Kensington glowed red, and now and then an orange-red tongue of flame rose up and vanished again in the deep blue night. All the rest of London was black. Then, nearer, I saw a strange light, a pale violet-purple shining glow that trembled in the night wind. For a little while I could not understand it. Then I knew it must be the red weed, and that this faint light came from it. With that understanding, my sleeping sense of wonder and my feeling for the true size of things woke again. I looked from that to Mars, red and clear, shining high in the west, and then I looked long and carefully at the dark land of Hampstead and Highgate. I stayed a very long time on the roof, thinking with wonder about the strange changes of the day. I remembered how my mind had moved from prayer at midnight to foolish card playing. A violent change of feeling came over me. I remember that I threw away my cigar almost like a sign. My foolishness came before me in an exaggerated light. I seemed a traitor to my wife and to all mankind. I was full of remorse. I decided to leave this strange man, this undisciplined dreamer of great things, to his drink and his eating, and to go on into London. There, it seemed to me, I had the best chance of learning what the Martians were doing and what my fellow men were doing. I was still on the roof when the late moon rose. Chapter 8. Friday night. After I left the artilleryman, I walked down the hill. I went along the High Street and crossed the bridge to Fulham. At that time, the red weed was thick and wild. It almost blocked the bridge, but some parts of it were already turning white. A disease was spreading through it, and soon it would kill the weed very fast. At the corner near the lane to Putney Bridge Station, I saw a man lying on the ground. He was covered in black dust, black like a chimney sweep. He was alive, but he was helpless and very drunk. I tried to speak to him, but he only cursed at me and tried to hit my head. I think I might have stayed and helped him, but his face looked so cruel that I walked on. From the bridge onward there was black dust on the road. In Fulham it grew thicker. The streets were horribly quiet. In a baker's shop, I found food. It was sour and hard and moldy, but I could eat it. As I went toward Walham Green, the streets became clearer. The powder was gone. Then I passed a row of white houses that were on fire. The sound of the fire was a relief. It felt good to hear something living. But when I went on toward Brompton, the streets were quiet again. Soon I came again to black powder in the streets and to dead bodies. In the length of Fulham Road, I saw about 12 bodies. They had been dead for many days, so I hurried past them. The black powder covered them and made their shapes soft. One or two had been moved by dogs. In places with no black powder, the city felt like a Sunday. Shops were closed. Houses were locked. Blinds were down. Everything was empty and still. In some places, thieves had been at work, but mostly only in food shops and wine shops. In one place, a jeweler's window was broken, but it looked like the thief had run away suddenly. Gold chains and a watch lay on the pavement. I did not touch them. Farther on, I saw a woman on a doorstep. Her dress was rusty brown. Her hand hung over her knee. It was cut, and blood had run down her dress. A big bottle of champagne was smashed, and it made a wet pool on the pavement. She looked asleep, but she was dead. The deeper I went into London, the deeper the stillness became. But it was not only the stillness of death. It was like the stillness of waiting. It was like fear that holds its breath. At any moment the destruction might return. It had already burned the northwestern edge of London. It had destroyed Ealing and Kilburn. It could strike these houses too and leave them smoking. It felt like a city already judged and abandoned. In South Kensington the streets were clear. There were no bodies and no black powder. Near South Kensington I heard the howling for the first time. It came slowly, almost without me noticing. It was two notes, like sobbing, repeating again and again, ulla, 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 ulla. When I passed streets that ran north, the sound became louder. Then buildings seemed to cut it off again. It came strongly down Exhibition Road. I stopped and stared toward Kensington Gardens. I wondered what this far wailing meant. It was as if the huge desert of houses had found a voice for its fear and loneliness. Ulla, 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 ulla. The sound came in great waves down the bright road between tall buildings. I turned north, still amazed, toward the iron gates of Hyde Park. For a moment, I wanted to break into the Natural History Museum and climb the towers to see over the park, but I decided to stay on the ground because I could hide more quickly. So I kept going up Exhibition Road. The big houses on both sides were empty and still. My footsteps echoed. Near the park gate I saw something strange, an overturned bus and the clean skeleton of a horse. I stared at it, trying to understand. Then I went on to the bridge over the Serpentine. The voice grew stronger, but above the roofs on the north side of the park, I could see nothing, only a haze of smoke to the northwest. Ulla, 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 ulla. It seemed to come from the area near Regent's Park. The sound worked on my mind. The strength that had held me up began to fade. The wailing took control of me. I felt very tired. My feet hurt. I was hungry and thirsty again. It was past noon. Why was I wandering alone in this dead city? Why was I alone while all London lay silent under its black cover? I felt an awful loneliness. I began thinking of old friends I had not thought about for years. I thought of poison in chemists' shops. I thought of liquor in wine shops. I remembered the two broken people I had seen, and I thought maybe only they and I were left in the city. I entered Oxford Street near Marble Arch. Again I saw black powder and dead bodies. I smelled something evil from cellar gratings. After the heat of my long walk, I was very thirsty. With great effort, I broke into a public house and found food and drink. After eating, I was exhausted. I went into a back room and slept on a black horsehair sofa. When I woke up, the howling was still in my ears. Ulla, 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 ulla. Now it was dusk. I found some biscuits and cheese in the bar. There was also a meat safe, but inside it there were only maggots. Then I wandered through silent squares toward Baker Street. I can name only one square, Portman Square. At last I came out near Regent's Park. As I reached the top of Baker Street, I saw something far away over the trees in the red light of sunset. It was the hood of a Martian giant. This was where the howling came from. I was not terrified. I saw him as if it was normal now. I watched him for a long time. He did not move. He seemed to be standing and crying for no reason I could see. I tried to think of a plan, but that constant sound confused my mind. Maybe I was too tired to feel fear. I was more curious than afraid. I wanted to know why he kept crying like that. I turned away from the park and went into Park Road to go around the edge. I stayed close to the terraces for shelter. From the direction of St. John's Wood, I got another view of the Martian. He was still there, still crying. Not far from Baker Street, I heard dogs. I saw one dog running fast toward me with a piece of rotten red meat in his mouth. A pack of thin, hungry dogs chased him. He ran wide around me as if he feared I might take his food. When the dogs disappeared, the howling sound returned again, filling the silent road. Halfway to St. John's Wood Station, I came upon a wrecked handling machine. At first, I thought a house had fallen across the road, but as I climbed among the ruins, I saw it. The great machine lay smashed, its tentacles bent and twisted. The front part was broken. It looked as if it had rushed straight into a house and been crushed when the house fell. I thought maybe the machine had escaped control because its Martian was dead. I could not climb far enough to see clearly, and it was too dark now. I could not see the blood on the seat or the bits of the Martian that dogs had eaten. Still wondering, I walked on toward Primrose Hill. Far away, through a gap in the trees, I saw another Martian in the park, near the zoological gardens. He was motionless, too, and silent. A little farther on, I met the red weed again. The Regent's Canal was full of it, a dark red spongy mass. As I crossed the bridge, the howling stopped. It stopped suddenly, as if someone had cut it off. The silence hit me like thunder. The houses around me stood tall and dim. Trees toward the park were turning black. The red weed climbed everywhere among the ruins, twisting in the dim light. Night was coming, and night brings fear. While that voice had sounded, the loneliness had been bearable. Because of that sound, London had seemed alive. The feeling of life had helped me. But when the voice ended, something changed. I did not know what had passed away, but I felt it. Then there was only a silence you could almost touch. London seemed to stare at me like a ghost. Windows looked like empty eye holes and skulls. My imagination filled the darkness with silent enemies. Terror seized me. I felt horror at my own boldness. The road ahead looked black as tar. I saw a twisted shape lying across the path. I could not force myself to go on. I turned down St. John's Wood Road and ran hard toward Kilburn. I ran away from the silence. I hid until long after midnight in a cabman's shelter on Harrow Road. Before dawn, my courage came back. While the stars were still in the sky, I turned again toward Regent's Park. I lost my way in the streets. Then I saw, down a long avenue in the gray dawn, the curve of Primrose Hill. On the top, standing tall against the fading stars, was a third Martian, upright and motionless like the others. A mad decision filled me. I wanted to die and end everything. I would not even kill myself. I would let the Martian do it. I marched straight toward the giant. As I came closer, the light grew. Then I saw many black birds circling around the hood. My heart jumped. I began to run. I hurried through red weed that blocked St. Edmund's Terrace. I had to wade through rushing water that came down from the waterworks toward Albert Road. The water reached my chest. Then I reached the grass just before sunrise. Huge mounds of earth had been piled around the top of the hill. It was like a fort. It was the biggest place the Martians had built. Thin smoke rose behind the heaps. An eager dog ran along the top and vanished. The thought in my mind grew stronger. It felt real. I felt no fear now, only a wild shaking joy as I ran up the hill toward the motionless monster. From the hood hung long brown strips. Hungry birds were pecking and tearing at them. In another moment, I climbed the earth wall and stood on the top. Inside the fort, I saw a great open space. Huge machines stood here and there. There were big mounds of strange material and odd shelters. and scattered around in overturned war machines and in stiff handling machines, and also lying in a row, were the Martians. They were dead. They had been killed by decay and disease bacteria. Their bodies could not fight these germs. Their bodies were not ready. They died the way the red weed was dying. After all human plans failed, they were killed by the smallest things on Earth. For this is what happened, and perhaps we could have guessed it if terror had not blinded us. Disease germs have always killed human beings. They have killed us since the beginning. They killed our ancestors before humans existed. But because of long struggle, we have learned to resist. We do not die easily. We fight many diseases, and for some germs, like those that rot dead things, our living bodies are safe. But on Mars, there are no bacteria. So when these invaders came, when they drank and fed, our tiny allies began to destroy them. Even when I watched them earlier, they were already doomed. They were dying and rotting while they still walked and worked. It could not be avoided. Man has paid a terrible price to live on this earth. By countless deaths we have gained the right to live here. And that right is ours against any enemy. Even if the Martians were 10 times stronger, the earth would still be ours. Men do not live or die for nothing. There were nearly 50 Martians scattered in that great pit and fort. Death caught them there. It must have been beyond their understanding. At that time, it was beyond my understanding too. I only knew that the terrible living things were now dead. For a moment, I believed it was a miracle. I thought God had changed his mind. I thought an angel of death had killed them in the night. I stood staring down into the pit, and my heart grew light. The sun was rising and setting the world on fire with light. The pit was still dark. The huge engines rose in shadow, strange and unreal, reaching up toward the light. Far below, I could hear dogs fighting over the bodies. On the far side of the pit lay the great flying machine. They had been testing it in our heavier air when decay stopped them. Death had come just in time. A crow cried above me, and I looked up at the huge fighting machine that would never fight again. Torn red strips of flesh hung from it and dripped down on the overturned seats on Primrose Hill. Then I turned and looked down the slope. I saw the other 2 Martians I had seen in the night. Black birds circled around them too. They stood like shining metal towers, harmless now, in the new sunlight. One had died while it was still crying. Perhaps it was the last one to die. Maybe its voice went on until the power inside its machine ran out. Around the pit, saved as if by a miracle, lay the great city of London. People who have only seen London under smoke cannot imagine how clear and beautiful it looked now, silent and empty. To the east, the sun blazed in a clean sky. Over black ruins and a broken church spire, the light was dazzling. Here and there, a roof caught the sun and flashed white. To the north were Kilburn and Hampstead, blue with houses. To the west, the city faded dimly. To the south, beyond the dead Martians, I could see Regent's Park. I could see the Langham Hotel, the dome of the Albert Hall, the Imperial Institute, and the great houses of Brompton Road. They looked small and clear in the sunrise. Farther still, the broken ruins of Westminster rose in haze. Far away, the Surrey hills were blue. The towers of the Crystal Palace shone like 2 silver sticks. St. Paul's was dark against the sunrise. For the first time, I saw it was damaged. A huge hole was torn in its western side. As I looked over this wide sea of houses and churches, silent and abandoned, I thought of all the lives that had built it. I thought of the hopes and work of millions. I thought of how fast destruction had almost taken it all. Then I understood the shadow was gone. Men could live again. Streets could be full again. My dear city, dead and silent now, could become alive and strong again. A wave of feeling rose in me, close to tears. The torment was over. Healing could begin that very day. Survivors scattered across the country, without leaders, without law, without food, like sheep with no shepherd, would begin to return. The people who fled by sea would come back. The pulse of life would grow stronger. It would beat again in the empty streets and flow across the empty squares. Whatever had been destroyed, The destroyer's hand had stopped. The black burned shells of houses would soon ring with hammers again. Men would rebuild. Trowels would tap. At that thought, I lifted my hands toward the sky and began to thank God. In a year, I thought, in a year. Then, with crushing force, I remembered myself and my wife, and the old life of hope and gentle kindness that had ended forever. Chapter 9. The fighting begins. And now the strangest thing happens in my story. Maybe it is not so strange. I remember very clearly all that I did that day, up to the time when I stood on the top of Primrose Hill. I was crying, and I was praising God there. Then my memory stops. After that, I forget. I remember nothing of the next 3 days. Later I learned that I was not the first person to find out that the Martians were beaten. Other wanderers like me had found it on the night before. One man, the first one, went to St. Martin's-le-Grand. While I was hiding in the cabman's hut, he managed to send a telegraph message to Paris. From Paris, the happy news went fast all over the world. Many cities had been very afraid. They were cold with fear. Then suddenly, they lit up with bright lights. People in Dublin knew it. People in Edinburgh knew it. People in Manchester knew it. People in Birmingham knew it. They knew it at the same time when I stood near the edge of the pit. Men were crying with joy. Men were shouting. Men stopped their work to shake hands. Men began to make up trains to go to London. They were doing this even as near as Crewe. The church bells had been silent for 2 weeks. Then the bells began again. Soon all England was ringing bells. Men on bicycles rode fast along every small country road. Their faces were thin. Their hair was wild. They shouted the good news. They shouted to tired people who stared in despair. They shouted that we were saved. And food was coming. Across the Channel, food came. Across the Irish Sea, food came. Across the Atlantic, food came. Corn and bread and meat were rushing to help us. It seemed as if every ship in the world was going toward London in those days. But I remember none of this. I only drifted like a madman. I found myself in the house of kind people. They told me later that they found me on the 3rd day. They found me wandering in the streets of St. John's Wood. I was crying. I was shouting strange words. I was not in my right mind. They told me that I was singing a silly song. I was singing, "The last man left alive. Hurrah! The last man left alive." It was like a child's rhyme, and it was crazy. These people had their own troubles. Still, they helped me. They took me in. They kept me safe. They protected me from myself. I cannot even give their name here, though I want to thank them, but I cannot. Later they told me that, during those lost days, they learned some of my story from my own mouth. I must have talked to them even while my mind was broken. When my mind became steady again, they told me something gently. They told me what they had learned about Leatherhead. 2 days after I was trapped in the ruins, Leatherhead was destroyed. Every person there was killed. A Martian did it. He wiped the place away as if it had never been. It seemed to be for no reason. It was like a boy crushing an anthill because he can. It was only the cruel joy of power. I was alone then. I was a lonely man. These people were kind to me. I was also a sad man. They were patient with me. I stayed with them 4 days after I became myself again. During that time, I felt a strange craving. It grew stronger. I wanted to go and look at what was left of my old life. That small life had once seemed bright and happy. Now I wanted to see the remains. It was a hopeless wish, and it was a dark wish. It was like I wanted to feed on my own sadness. They tried to stop me. They told me not to go. They tried to turn my mind away from this sad desire, but at last I could not resist it. I promised them I would come back to them. I left them. I will admit that I cried when I left these 4-day friends. I went out again into the streets. Not long ago, these streets had been dark and strange and empty. Now people were coming back. In some places, shops were open. I even saw a drinking fountain with water running. I remember how bright the day looked. It felt almost cruel. I was walking back, full of sadness, toward my little house at Woking. Around me the streets were busy. Life moved everywhere. It was so active that it seemed impossible that many people had been killed. But then I began to notice things. Many people had yellow skin. Many men had long, rough hair. Their eyes looked large and bright. Many still wore dirty rags. Almost every other man looked like a tramp. Their faces often had one of two looks. Some faces showed jumping joy and strong energy. Other faces showed hard determination. Apart from the faces, London looked like a city of tramps. Groups in the city were giving out bread. This bread came from the French government. The ribs of the few horses were showing. The horses looked thin and sad. Tired special constables stood at street corners. They had white badges. I saw little of the damage from the Martians until I reached Wellington Street. There I saw the red weed climbing on the stone parts of Waterloo Bridge. At the corner of the bridge I saw a strange contrast, like many of that time. A sheet of paper was stuck up against a thick growth of red weed. A stick held the paper in place. It was a placard. It was from the first newspaper that began again. It was the Daily Mail. I bought a copy. I paid with a blackened shilling I found in my pocket. Most of the paper was blank, but the one man who printed it had made a strange back page. He filled the back page with a silly plan of advertisements. The printed words were full of feeling. The news workers had not returned yet. I learned almost nothing new, but I did read this. People had already begun to examine the Martian machines. In 1 week, they had learned amazing things. The article even said that the secret of flying was found. At that time, I did not believe it. At Waterloo, I found free trains. They were taking people home. The first big rush had already passed. There were not many people on the train. I did not want to talk. I had no wish for small talk. I got a compartment to myself. I sat with my arms folded. I looked out at the land. The sun shone, but the land was ruined. The ruined world flowed past the windows. Just outside the station, the train went over temporary rails. It jolted. On both sides of the railway, the houses were burned and black. Up to Clapham Junction, London still looked dirty with the black smoke dust. 2 days of storms and rain had not cleaned it. At Clapham Junction, the line had been broken again. Hundreds of men were working there. Many were clerks and shopmen who now had no jobs. They worked beside the usual road workers. The train jolted again over new rails laid in haste. All down the line, the land looked thin and strange. Wimbledon had suffered badly. Walton looked less hurt than other places because its pine woods had not burned. The Wandle and the Mole and every small stream were full of red weed. It was heaped up. It looked like butcher's meat mixed with pickled cabbage. The Surrey pine woods were too dry for the red climbing weed to grow thick there. Beyond Wimbledon, near the line, I saw big heaps of earth. They were around the 6th cylinder. People stood around it. Some soldiers, sappers, were working there. A Union Jack flew above it. It flapped in the morning wind. The nursery grounds were crimson with the weed. It was a wide, painful red. Purple shadows lay on it. My eyes wanted to look away. It was a relief to look at the blue-green hills in the east. The railway line near Woking Station was still being repaired, so I got off at Byfleet Station. Then I walked on the road to Maybury. I passed the place where I and the artilleryman had spoken to the hussars. I passed the place where the Martian had appeared to me in the thunderstorm. Because I was curious, I turned aside. Among thick red plants I found the broken dog cart. Near it lay the white bones of the horse. The bones were scattered and gnawed. I stood for a time and looked at them. Then I went back through the pine wood. In places the red weed was as high as my neck. I went on until I reached the village again. I found that the landlord of the Spotted Dog had been buried. Then I passed the College Arms and went home. A man stood at an open cottage door. He greeted me by name as I passed. Then I saw my house. For one moment, hope flashed in me. Then it died at once. The door had been forced. It was not fastened. It was opening slowly as I came near. Then it slammed shut again. The curtains of my study fluttered out of the open window. This was the window where I and the artilleryman had watched the dawn. No one had closed it since. The bushes were still smashed, just as I had left them nearly 4 weeks before. I stumbled into the hall. The house felt empty. The stair carpet was rough and stained where I had crouched. That was the night of the storm, when I was soaked and cold. I saw our muddy footprints still going up the stairs. I followed the footprints to my study. On my writing table, I saw my work. The selenite paperweight was still on it. The paper lay there as I had left it on the afternoon when the cylinder opened. For a short time I stood and read my old writing. It was about moral ideas and how civilization changes them. The last sentence was the start of a prophecy. I had written, "In about 200 years, we may expect," and then it stopped. The sentence ended suddenly. I remembered that morning. I remembered how I could not think properly. I remembered how I broke off to get my daily chronicle from the newsboy. I remembered going to the garden gate. I remembered listening to his strange story about men from Mars. Then I went downstairs and entered the dining room. The mutton and the bread were there, but now they were rotten. A beer bottle lay overturned, just as I and the artilleryman had left it. My home was empty and dead. I understood how foolish my hope had been. I had held a weak hope for too long. Then something strange happened. "It is no use," said a voice. "The house is deserted. No one has been here for 10 days. Do not stay here and hurt yourself. No one escaped but you." I was shocked. Had I spoken aloud? I turned quickly. Behind me, the French window was open. I stepped toward it and looked out. And there, as I stood amazed and afraid, I saw them. I saw my cousin. I saw my wife. My wife was white in the face. She had no tears on her cheeks. She gave a small cry. "I came," she said. "I knew. She put her hand to her throat. She swayed. I stepped forward at once. I caught her in my arms. Chapter 10. In the Storm. Now I am finishing my story, and I feel sorry about one thing. There are still many big questions. People still argue about them. I cannot help much with these questions. In one way, I know people will criticize me. My work is in ideas and thinking about the future. I study speculative philosophy. I do not know much about bodies and animals. I have read only 1 or 2 books about physiology. But I think Carver's idea about the fast death of the Martians is very likely true. In my story, I have used that idea as if it is almost certain. After the war, people examined the bodies of the Martians. In those bodies, they did not find new bacteria. They found only bacteria that already live on Earth. Also, the Martians did not bury their dead. They killed people in a careless way, and they left bodies behind. This seems to show that they did not understand rot and decay. They did not understand how dead bodies change and become dangerous. This idea seems very likely, but it is not fully proven. There are other things we still do not know. We do not know what the black smoke was made of. It killed with terrible power. We also do not know how the heat ray was made. The machine that produced the heat ray is still a puzzle. There were terrible accidents in the laboratories at Ealing and South Kensington. Because of these disasters, many scientists do not want to study the heat ray again. They are afraid. People did look at the black powder with spectrum analysis. This test seemed to show something strange. It pointed to an unknown element. It showed a bright group of 3 lines in the green. Some people think this unknown element may join with argon. They think it may make a compound. They think this compound may act on the blood and kill very fast. But this is only a guess. It is not proven. And most readers do not want such guesses. They want the story, not the science. Also, after the destruction of Shepperton, brown scum floated down the Thames. Nobody examined it at that time, and now none can be found. So we cannot learn from it. I have already told what was found in the Martians' bodies, as far as an examination was possible. Many dogs had been prowling and biting, and they spoiled much. But now everyone knows the great specimen kept in spirits at the Natural History Museum. Many people have seen it. Many drawings have been made of it. Beyond that, their bodies and their structure are mainly a matter for scientists. There is one question that is more serious for everyone. Will the Martians attack again? I do not think people are thinking about this enough. Right now, Mars is in conjunction, But every time Mars returns to opposition, I expect danger again. I believe they may try another attack. In any case, we should prepare. It seems to me we should be able to find the position of the great gun on Mars, the gun that fired the cylinders. We should keep watching that part of the planet. We should keep a steady watch. We should try to know before anything comes. If we can know early, then we might destroy a cylinder before the Martians can come out. We could use dynamite or artillery. We might smash the cylinder while it is still too hot for them to move, or we might kill them with guns as soon as the screw opens. It seems to me the Martians lost a great advantage. Their first attack surprised us, but that surprise is gone now. They cannot surprise us in the same way again. Maybe they understand this too. Lessing has given good reasons for another idea. He thinks the Martians may have landed on Venus. 7 months ago, Venus and Mars were in line with the Sun. This means that, from Venus, Mars was in opposition. After that, a strange bright marking appeared on the dark half of Venus. It was long and curved, like a winding line. Almost at the same time, a faint dark mark of a similar winding shape was seen in a photograph of Mars. To understand how similar they look, you must see the drawings. The resemblance is very strong. Still, it is not certain. It is only a strong suggestion. Whether we expect another invasion or not, these events must change how we think about the future of humans. We have learned something hard. We cannot think of Earth as a safe home that no one can enter. We cannot think the planet is closed and protected for man. We can never be sure about good or evil that may come suddenly out of space. Maybe, in the larger plan of the universe, the invasion from Mars will bring some good for men in the end. It has taken away our calm confidence about the future. That calm confidence can make people weak and lazy. It can lead to decline. This invasion has also brought great gifts to science. The new knowledge is enormous, and it has helped people see that all humans share one common life. It has helped the idea of the common good of mankind. It may be that the Martians watched what happened to their first attackers here. Maybe they learned a lesson, and maybe on Venus they have found a safer home. I cannot say. But for many years there will be no rest in watching Mars. People will watch the Martian disk with strong attention, and when shooting stars fall, men will feel fear again. Those fiery darts in the sky will bring worry to all people. The change in men's minds is very great. Before the first cylinder fell, many people believed there was no life anywhere else. They believed that, in all the deep space, there was no life beyond the small surface of our little world. Now we see further than that. If the Martians can reach Venus, then it may also be possible for men to reach other planets, and one day, far in the future, the sun will cool slowly. Then Earth will not be fit for life. That must happen in the end. When that time comes, maybe life that began here will not end. Maybe it will spread outward. Maybe it will go to our sister planet and live there. In my mind, I see a dim and wonderful picture. I see life spreading slowly from this small place, from this seedbed of our solar system, out into the huge silent space of the stars. But that is a far dream. And there is another thought. The destruction of the Martians may be only a delay. It may be only a short time of safety. Perhaps the future is not for us. Perhaps the future is for them. I must also say this. The stress and fear of that time has stayed in me. It has left a lasting doubt in my mind. I feel unsafe inside, even now. I sit in my study at night. I write by lamplight, and suddenly I see again the valley below, full of twisting flames. I feel again that the house behind me is empty and dead. I walk on the Byfleet Road. Normal vehicles pass me. A butcher boy rides in a cart. A cab carries visitors. A workman rides a bicycle. Children walk to school. And suddenly these things do not feel real. They become like shadows. And in my mind I am again hurrying with the artilleryman through the hot silence. At night I see again the black powder falling on the streets. I see bodies under it, twisted and still. Then, in my mind, those bodies rise up again. They are torn and bitten by dogs. They make strange sounds. They become fiercer, they become paler and uglier, they become mad shapes of men. Then I wake up in the dark, cold and miserable. I go to London and I see crowds in Fleet Street and the Strand. People are busy, going here and there, and a thought comes into my mind. It feels as if they are ghosts from the past. It feels as if they are only shadows that walk in streets I have seen silent and terrible. They look like life, but in my fear they seem like a mockery, like a dead body forced to move. And there is another strange thing. I stand on Primrose Hill, as I did only a day before I write this last part. I look out over the wide city. I see a great sea of houses, blue and dim in smoke and mist. It fades into the low sky. I see people walking among the flower beds on the hill. I see visitors looking at the Martian machine that still stands there. I hear children playing and shouting. And I remember another time. I remember when I saw the same place in the dawn, bright and sharp, and yet silent and hard, on that last great day. And the strangest thing of all is this. I hold my wife's hand again. I feel her fingers in mine, and I think about what happened. I had counted her among the dead. She had counted me among the dead. Now we are alive, together, after all that darkness.